Chapter 321, The Day the Sky Fell. King Noah stood on the ramparts as his gaze eyed the battlefield. The ant army was now crawling up the fortress walls while the defenders fought bravely to repel them. Rain was falling from the sky, but this was not ordinary rain. It was the blood of the tens of thousands of humans, beasts, and flying ants that waged war across the skies. Although King Noah was worried about the disappearance of his son, Prince Rufus, they were currently at war and he could only assign a small number of men to look for his whereabouts. Lawrence, and the other archmages of the Hellan kingdom, threw spell after spell after spell in order to repel the invaders from the fortress. The sword saint, Aramis, was currently thinning out the ants that were trying to overcome the fortress defenders as well. His disciples, Cid and Aerith, were also fighting side by side as their swords claimed the lives of their enemies. As the battle was nearing its peak, a man, wearing a red robe, stood on a mountain overlooking the battlefield. Several men wearing black robes stood behind his back as they waited for his signal. "It's time," the red-robed man said softly. "We have gathered more than enough sacrifices. Tell them all to activate the altars." "Yes, my lord," a black-robed man replied. He then threw a red orb towards the sky where it exploded, revealing a red skull. A few seconds later, the red skull started laughing as it grew in size, until its visage overshadowed the entire battlefield. Suddenly, hundreds of pillars of light shot out towards the sky from different locations across the southern continent. The Hellan kingdom and the Aenisha dynasty momentarily paused their battle as the screams and shrieks from the souls of the dead sounded through the sky. The millions of souls that the organization had collected from the ongoing war, flew from the altars that they had built towards the red skull that was laughing in the sky of the battlefield. It was as if the skull was mocking the warriors for their stupidity of fighting against each other. The laughter of the skull was heard all over the southern continent. Everyone who heard it felt the hairs on the back of their necks stand on end and a tingling sensation passed through their spines. When the skull stopped laughing, it opened its mouth wide to swallow all the souls that were being sent to it by the altars that the organization had built. Its eyes glowed with a crimson light as it devoured the power of the souls it had ingested. Soon it shot a beam of red light into the heavens. This was the pseudo-11th circle spell that the organization had prepared for this day. A spell that would allow them to conquer the entire southern continent with ease, without anyone to stop them. At that exact moment, a golden beam of light shot out from the west and collided with the red light that shot towards the sky. The golden light came from the statue of the goddess Astrid which stood on top of the temple that William and EST had visited in order to clear the trial of courage. The two spells collided. After that, a purple aurora borealis descended upon the entirety of the southern continent. James looked at this marvelous sight from within the fortress he was defending inside. "Jekyll, Ezio, I'll leave everything in your hands," James said. "Understood," Jekyll replied. "Yes, my liege," Ezio turned into a black mist and hid in Jekyll's shadow. "Rest assured. We will not fail." James nodded and looked towards the west where Lant was located. "Watch over them for me." As soon as these words left his lips, James' body was engulfed by the light of the purple aurora borealis. Within the blink of an eye, his body, along with the rest of the people inside the fortress who were above the age of 20, turned into crystal statues. Jekyll opened his mouth and swallowed the statues of James, Damien, and Gideon. The smile of the dentist of Lant disappeared as he scanned the entire battlefield that was littered with crystal statues. The human armies of the Zealand kingdom were not spared and all of them had turned into statues as well. The minotaurs and the other beasts of the Zealand army were unaffected by the effects of the spell, but all of them were greatly weakened. Jekyll transformed into his true form and opened his mouth wide. Soon, all of these beasts were helplessly sucked into his gaping mouth, which was akin to a black hole. He only stopped when no survivors of the beast army were left on the scene. Half a minute later, Jekyll returned to his human form and gazed in the direction of Raven Lord Citadel. Such a devious plan. Jekyll grinned evilly. "Well then, I guess it's time to go back to Lant. Let's go, Ezio." A red portal appeared behind Jekyll and Ezio's blood wyvern screeched in greeting. The dentist of Lant jumped on its back as Ezio's mount flew towards the west. What happened?" Aerith gasped as she looked at the crystal statues around her. The ant beasts had become paralyzed, but they didn't turn into statues like the humans. "Master!" Cid shouted as he ran towards the sword saint, who had also turned to crystal, while killing a centennial ant that had managed to climb over the wall. Loud thudding sounds resounded across the battlefield as the flying magical beasts crashed to the ground. Their riders had turned into crystals and the beasts did their best to land in their weakened states. Some of these statues fell off from their mounts and crashed into the ground. Cid didn't have the time to check the fates of these statues that had fallen from thousands of meters above ground. His mind was still reeling from the shock that his master had ended up in this manner. Aerith stood beside her brother and examined her master's current form. She had never heard of a spell that could turn someone into a crystal statue. "Your Majesty!" EST shouted as he hurried towards King Noah's side. Isaac ran beside him as they made their way to the ramparts where King Noah stood, frozen in place. All the adults inside the fortress had been turned into crystals, while the students, and young knights that had taken part in the war, were spared from the effects of the 11th circle spell. Pandemonium ensued as the survivors tried to understand the situation they were currently facing. Meanwhile in Lant. "Mama. Papa." Eve looked up at her parents who were standing side by side. They were currently outside the Ainsworth residence and looking in the direction where the red skull had appeared in the sky. "Mama. Papa." Eve cried out as she hugged her parents' bodies. She didn't understand what was happening. All she knew was that his parents had stopped moving and weren't paying attention to her. "Mama. Papa." Tears started to stream down the side of Eve's face as she called out for her mama and papa. It was quite unfortunate that, no matter how much Mordred and Anna loved their little girl, they were unable to hear her call because they had turned into crystal statues. They were unable to wipe away the tears on their daughter's face, and tell her that everything was going to be all right. Eve's sad wailing echoed within the Ainsworth residence. Her pained cries didn't stop as she firmly held onto Anna's statue. This also marked the beginning of the darkest days that the southern continent had seen for the past 1,000 years. Takam glanced at the land from the peak of the Kirinter Mountains. He sat on his throne as he surveyed his domain. His thoughts returned to the time when he met the half-elf and shared a few words with him. Survive the war first, the demigod muttered the words that he had told William several weeks ago. Let's meet again when the sky falls. The sky had already fallen. Now, all he had to do, was wait. End of Volume 2, When the Sky Falls. Chapter 322, The Shepherd vs. the Celestial Army Part 1. Eve. William shouted as he reached out his hands to hug his beloved little cousin. That is when he awoke from his dream. Out of nowhere, the image of Eve's crying face appeared inside his mind, which prompted him to wake up from his dreamless sleep. The half-elf immediately stood up and scanned his surroundings. He was feeling restless and something was urging him to take action as soon as he could. It was currently nighttime within the heavenly domain, and countless stars twinkled in the heavens. Not far from him, Zhu and Sha sat on a log. Zhu stirred the campfire that he had made, and waited for the fish Sha caught earlier to finish cooking. William had passed out after releasing Zhu from the golden cube to keep his promise. He didn't know that Zhu had acted of his own accord and brought him to the edge of the 12th trial, where the million-strong celestial army, that guarded that heavenly gate, stood. You're finally awake, oink. Zhu said after hearing William's shout. Oink. Are you hungry? The fish are almost cooked. Sha glanced in the boy's direction before closing his eyes to meditate. Since he had lost to William, he wanted to see how the boy would be able to cross this last hurdle and reach the heavenly gate in order to clear this trial. William nodded and said his thanks to Zhu before sitting on the log opposite the two demonic guardians. He stared at the bonfire as he recalled the sad expression on Eve's face. It was so heartbreaking that William wanted to go to Lant as soon as possible to check on her condition. It's cooked, Zhu announced. Here, have one. The pig demon handed the grilled fish to William, before grabbing another to pass to his friend Sha. After he had given each of them a piece, he grabbed the 5 remaining fish and ate them hungrily. William didn't say anything and just absent-mindedly bit into the grilled fish in his hand. He was still thinking about his little cousin and wondered if what he saw was really a dream or reality. The three of them ate in silence. Only the crackling sounds of the bonfire and Zhu's chewing could be heard within their small camp. Half an hour later, William raised his head to look at the pig demon that was currently smoking on a pipe. Based on their surroundings, the half-elf realized that they were no longer in the desert where they had fought earlier. As if reading his thoughts, Zhu removed the pipe from his lips and blew a puff of smoke towards the red-headed boy. We are currently at the boundaries of the heavenly gate. Oink. Zhu stated. You see that small shrine over there? That is the teleport gate that will take you to the Elysian Fields. It is also the final battlefield that you need to overcome in order to leave the heavenly domain. Thank you for the information, but can you tell me more? William inquired. I noticed that each trial's difficulty increased the closer I traveled to the heavenly gate. Honestly, if I didn't use any underhanded tricks, I would not have been able to defeat the two of you. What is the final trial like? Zhu glanced at the meditating Sha behind him and tapped the sand demon's shoulder. Sha sighed as he opened his eyes to look at William. The last trial is finding a way to reach the heavenly gate that is protected by the celestial army. Mind you, this army is numbered in the millions. If you don't have any tricks that will allow you to sneak through the heavenly gates unnoticed, you will have no choice but to fight your way through. William frowned as he pondered the difficulty of his last mission. He had already formulated a plan in his mind, but he didn't know if it was applicable. The only methods he could use were the skills that he had learned in his quick-shot shepherd job class. He had tried to activate the heroic avatar skill many times during his trials, but no immortal hero seemed interested in lending their hand to help him. Feeling restless, William walked towards the shrine that would take him to the Elysian Fields. However, he didn't enter it right away. He sat cross-legged in front of it and meditated. William would wait until morning before entering the shrine when his mental strength had reached its peak. Zhu and Sha watched him from a distance. They had discussed during their journey, while carrying the sleeping William, that they would go with the boy to the Elysian Fields to see how he would fare against the celestial army. They wanted to see, with their own eyes, if the boy that had beaten the two of them would be able to create a miracle. Does he have any chances of winning without a heroic hero stepping in to help him? Lily asked. David played with his beard as he looked at the meditating boy from his palace. I don't know. Although I believe in William, the chances of him succeeding this trial without any outside interference is very low. Lily nodded before looking at Issei, who was seated beside her. How about you? Do you think he will be able to clear this trial? Even if he is able to use the power of our two divinities, his chances are next to impossible, Issei answered. Right now, he can only use the power of our divinities in his shepherd class. I believe that David wants him to explore and experiment with new techniques by relying solely on the abilities we bestowed upon him. Lily nodded and secretly glanced at David before whispering in Issei's ears. Should we pull some strings and bribe one of those immortal heroes to become William's heroic spirit? You shouldn't do that, David reprimanded the lowly that sat beside him. Karma also plays a role in the fate of an individual. I believe that William's determination will be able to reach his destined guardian. Let fate play its course. Forceful intervention might give an outcome that none of us want to see. Lily sighed and tossed her idea aside. David was right. Karma also played a role in a person's fate. He just hoped that the karma that William had accumulated in his previous lifetime would be enough to move the hearts of the immortal warriors that were currently watching over his trial. A few minutes before sunrise, William opened his eyes and carefully stood up from the ground. He did some light stretching and summoned the wooden staff in his hand. After taking a deep breath, he touched the shrine in front of him. A small ripple appeared in the place where his hand had landed. Soon William's body was sucked inside the shrine. Seeing that the boy had already left for his trial, Zhu and Cher hurried towards the shrine. "Brother, let's go." "Oink." Zhu said. "It has been a while since I've seen the celestial army. My hands are starting to itch. Cher hummed as he placed his hand over the shrine. William stood on a vast plain. In front of him was a towering mountain where thousands of flags fluttered in the air. Warriors that numbered in the millions looked at him with a serene gaze. They were the soldiers that protected the heavenly gate from any trespasser who dared to try and leave the domain. William planted his wooden staff on the ground and aimed its tip at the center of the giant gate that stood in the middle of the towering mountain. William braced himself and executed the plan that he had thought of while meditating. He was going to try it for the first time and he didn't know if it was going to work or not. Even so, he didn't hesitate and went ahead with his plan. This was the last hurdle that stood in his way, and William would not allow anything to stand in his way. William glared at the celestial army in the distance as he channeled his aura in his wooden staff. Quick Shot War Art. Chapter 323, The Shepherd vs. the Celestial Army Part 2. Quick Shot War Art. Fusion Form. William said with determination. Blitzer Railgun. William's body merged with the wooden staff, before it shot towards the center of the heavenly gate at a speed that broke the sound barrier. The celestial soldiers that were deployed a kilometer away from the heavenly gate were completely caught off guard by William's unexpected move that they were unable to do anything to stop him. When William was only 100 meters away from the heavenly gate, several celestial warriors wearing grey armor flew into the air and collided with him. A resounding clap ensued and the grey knights were pushed back by the collision, sending them flying in different directions. The wooden staff continued its flight towards the heavenly gate, but its acceleration had greatly diminished. It was then when a black celestial knight flew towards him holding a golden shield. A loud crackling sound reverberated in the air as the wooden staff and the golden shield collided. The red-headed boy's form appeared in front of the golden knight with a stream of blood oozing from the side of his lips. However, William didn't falter. He stepped on the head of the knight and used it as a stepping stone to jump forward. The heavenly gate was only a few dozen meters away from him and he took this opportunity to propel himself to it. Suddenly, another black knight appeared. This time, it grew in size like a giant and used its hand to swat the half-elf like a fly. As the hand descended, William raised his staff to face it head-on. Magnum Burst. William roared as he executed the very first multi-purpose skill he had used since he acquired the Shepherd job class. The small wooden staff nullified the force of the hand and pushed it back, along with the giant knight, due to its knockback effect. 3, 2, William counted inside his head. 1. William aimed his wooden staff at the gate and prayed that he would make it in time. Quick Shot War Art, Fusion Form, William yelled internally. Blitzer Railgun. A crimson knight suddenly appeared in front of William and unleashed a battle aura that caused a powerful gust of wind that blew William away, injuring him, and preventing him from finishing his move. The crimson knight then unsheathed his blade and flew towards William. His intention was to cut William in half to end his life, and bring his soul back to the cycle of reincarnation. The half-elf couldn't see the heavenly gate from his vantage point because he got disoriented by the crimson knight's surprise attack. In the end, William pointed his wooden staff in the direction opposite of where the knight was coming from and shouted. Blitzer Railgun. The red-headed boy shot out like a blur, dodging the crimson knight's attack that would have sliced him in half. A few seconds later, an explosion was heard a few miles away from the heavenly gate. The crimson knight gazed at the cloud of smoke rising in the distance and sheathed his weapon back to his scabbard. Frankly, the crimson knight felt admiration for the boy because the half-elf almost succeeded in his plan. If he was only a second late, the boy would have definitely passed through the gate due to his unexpected display of skill. William's body, which was covered in injuries, laid in the center of a 10-meter-deep crater. The impact he received during the collision with the knights had broken several bones in his body. His desperate struggle to escape from the crimson knight had succeeded. However, the injuries he sustained in his emergency landing worsened those injuries. Right now, William was paralyzed because his spine had received significant injury due to the force of his landing. Fortunately it didn't snap, but he was currently in very bad shape. William had his eyes closed, but his senses were still active. It was then when he felt two familiar presences approaching him, which made him sigh in relief. Oink. Are you still alive, boy? Zhu asked as he tapped William's face with his hand. Shat, I think the boy is dead. Can I eat him? William couldn't raise his arms, but he still managed to raise his middle finger to prove that he was still alive. Zhu pretended to not see the injured boy's attempt to prevent himself from getting eaten. Shat, on the other hand, just shook his head and sat beside the fallen boy. You almost did it, kid, Sha said. His voice was laced with respect and admiration because this was the first time he had seen someone almost clear the trial in less than a minute. William sighed internally as he endured the pain that was racking his body. The red-headed boy was not new to pain. He had suffered many times in the past and the pain he was feeling now was just second nature to him. Since he couldn't move his body, the shepherd decided to sleep in order to recover from his exhaustion. Soon, a loud snore escaped from William's lips, startling the pig demon and the sand demon by his side. Zhu and Sha, who were watching over the boy, glanced at each other in surprise. They never thought that the boy would be able to sleep in his current state, let alone snore at the same time. What a weirdo. Oink. Zhu gasped. Bro, are you sure I can't eat him? Looking at him annoys me right now. Sha snorted as he gazed at the heavenly gate in the distance. His eyes narrowed into slits as a possibility crossed his mind. That was so close. Lily waved her hands and stomped her foot in frustration. If that annoying Crimson Knight hadn't interfered, William would have cleared the trial. A/N, Crimson Knights are equivalent to the Saint rank in mortal standards. If we are going to compare the rank to those of beasts, he would be in between the Millennial and Myriad Beast rank categories. The rule of thumb is that Saints will always be weaker than Myriad Beasts if they fought one-on-one. Issei and David both sighed at the same time. Both of them agreed with Lily. Even David was surprised by William's ingenuity to create the fusion art. Basically, the quick-shot shepherd job class allowed William to create his own skills, as long as they were within the scope of its limitations. The first skill that William created when he defeated the second trial was the quick-shot war art. This skill was inspired from the various war arts that belonged to the martial classes. Since it was an acceptable skill, the laws of the heavenly trial approved of it. The fusion war art was the last skill that William decided to create after winning against Zhu and Sha. He figured that using himself as ammunition was a good alternative in order to surprise the defenders of the heavenly gate. Of course, it also gave William excellent mobility during battles, and a good means of escape when things got out of hand. After all, very few beings could catch him if he traveled at the speed of sound. The immortal warriors that had watched William's battle had their mouths opened wide. They couldn't believe what they saw, and some of them even wondered if they were capable of preventing the boy from passing through the gate if they were the ones in the position of the celestial knights. The king grinned as a playful expression appeared on his face. Unexpected. Truly unexpected, the king said softly before drinking from the wine cup in his hand. He sighed deeply in order to appreciate the taste of the heavenly wine made from the immortal peaches from the garden of Zhuangmu. That trick will only work once. The king thought as he glanced at the sleeping boy who was riddled with injuries. What are you going to do next, kid? Chapter 324, Unwanted Guests that came from distant lands. While William was recuperating from his injuries, the battle at Ravenlord Citadel had come to a complete halt. While the students and the young knights were busy trying to understand what had just transpired, the red-robed man, who was watching the scene, frowned. The pseudo-11th circle spell that they executed should have put everyone above the age of 20 into deep sleep. Their plan was to kill all the important and strong people in the southern continent, while they were in this helpless state. However, the spell that they cast using millions of souls didn't work the way they had envisioned it to. That golden light, the red-robed man muttered. Just where did that golden light come from? When the spell was about to activate, a golden light had shot out from the west and collided with the red beam in the sky. The leader of the organization that managed the southern continent knew that the golden light was responsible for changing the properties of the spell that they had worked on for years. The red-robed man had already received reports from his subordinates that the important figures that they had planned to assassinate couldn't be killed because the crystal statues were impregnable. No forms of weapons, nor magic, could break it, rendering the assassins helpless in accomplishing their missions. The red-robed man pondered for a while before giving out his order. Secure the crystal statue of the Helan King, along with the archmages, and the high-ranking nobles, the red-robed man ordered. Also, capture the Princess of Frisia. The Crown Prince wants her. Yes, my lord. EST looked at the king's crystal statue with a distraught expression on his face. The fourth-year students of the magic and spirit divisions had already tried to undo the spell that had turned the king into a statue, but none of their spells worked. In the end, the head prefects of both divisions concluded that this was a spell that far exceeded their level of expertise. Right now, the whole fort was in a state of chaos and no one knew what to do next. It was at this time when Lionel, the crown prince of the Helan Kingdom, made his presence known and raised his voice. Everyone calm down. Prince Lionel ordered. Do not panic. For now, take care of the injured and those that are in critical conditions. They are our priorities. There's nothing we can do for the people that have turned into statues. For now, focus on the living. EST felt his blood boil when he heard the words focus on the living. It was as if Prince Lionel had declared that those that had transformed into statues were already dead and beyond saving. Isaac hurriedly grabbed EST's shoulder and shook his head. Calm down, young master, Isaac said. Now is not the time for internal conflict. The king is safe, at least for now. There's no need to have an argument with the crown prince. EST closed his eyes and forcefully took hold of his emotions. He took a few deep breaths in order to calm his nerves. You're right, Isaac, EST replied after his anger had dissipated. Let's help the others first. Yes, young master. Isaac nodded. The two were about to help the injured students and knights of the kingdom when they saw the third princess walk towards them with her maidservants trailing behind her. How is the king? Princess Sidonie asked. EST shook his head and looked at the princess apologetically. The king is under some kind of curse. Right now, none of the students here have the ability to undo his curse. I see. Princess Sidonie nodded her head. She was about to ask a few more questions when a familiar voice called out to her from behind. Princess, I'm glad that you are safe, Prince Lionel said with a smile. It would be best if you stayed beside me for now. Your loyal knights have turned into crystal statues and we are currently understaffed. I will be more than happy to ensure your safety, while we try to find a way to dispel the curses that fell upon our people. Princess Sidonie looked at the handsome young man, but she didn't move towards the crown prince. Instead, she walked towards Priscilla, who was ordering the members of the Anglo-Ryan war sovereign to regroup. Vice Commander, will it be fine if I place my safety in your hands? Princess Sidonie asked with a light bow. She didn't like the crown prince of the Helan kingdom because she didn't trust him. The mere thought of staying by his side made her skin crawl. Priscilla nodded and gave the princess a sweet smile. Of course, Your Highness. The Anglo-Ryan knights will ensure your safety. Thank you, Vice Commander, Princess Sidonie curtsied. I will be in your care from now on. Prince Lionel watched this exchange with a smile, but he didn't think much of it. Now that Princess Sidonie's guards were out of the picture, there was no one in the kingdom that could save her from him. The Anglo-Ryan knights were the knights of the Helan kingdom. Since that was the case, they would take orders from him. You can struggle all you want, my beloved princess, but it won't change the fact that you can't escape my grasp, Prince Lionel thought. The organization had promised him that they would secure the princess for him no matter what. This alone gave Prince Lionel the confidence that Princess Sidonie wouldn't be able to leave the Helan kingdom under their watchful eye. Meanwhile, in the sea of the southern continent. Forward. Elador, the commander of the Elven regiment, ordered. The time has come to conquer. Set forth to the lands of the southern continent. The elves cheered as they carried out their commander's order. The 11th princess, who had joined this expedition, sat on her makeshift throne and observed the land that they were about to conquer. A flash of anticipation appeared on her light green eyes as she envisioned the flags of their homelands being raised on foreign soil. She was sent by her father to oversee the mission, but the king didn't order her to take part in the invasion of the southern continent. The elven princess was only there as a spectator. She didn't have any authority to command the elven army that was composed of the prodigies of the various clans of the Silver Moon continent. Even so, she was still a princess and the elves still held her in high regard. Even Elador, who secretly wished to become her life partner, was very courteous to her every time the two of them were to exchange words with each other. Almost at the same time that the elven fleet moved forward, the Cretarian naval armada also set forth towards the southern lands. Jason, the commander of the Cretarian fleet, smirked as he gave the elven fleet a sidelong glance. He was very tempted to test the mettle of the elves, but he knew that his mission was more important. The Cretar armada and the elven fleet parted ways. They were not going to the same destination, however. Elador and Jason knew that this was just a prelude for the battle that was about to take place. They had an unwritten agreement that they would settle their differences once they had occupied the lands of the southern continent. Only after they had secured their respective territories, would they face off against each other to see who was more capable between the two of them. For Elador and Jason, no one in the southern continent was their match. Not even the organization who had unknowingly prepared this wonderful scenario for the unwanted guests that came from distant lands. Chapter 325, Escape from Ravenlord Citadel. An hour after the adults had turned into crystal statues, a semblance of acceptance had descended among the survivors in Ravenlord Citadel. The injured had been taken care of, and everyone looked to Crown Prince Lionel for orders. Since the king and the great general were out of commission, he was the highest commanding officer inside the fortress. Naturally, Prince Lionel did his best to make himself look good in front of the warriors, and most importantly, to Princess Sidonie. However, the princess remained indifferent to his advances to personally safeguard her own safety. Princess Sidonie stuck close to Priscilla and remained with the knights of the Anglo-Ryan war sovereign, which irritated the crown prince to no end. While he was still thinking of ways on how to get his hands on the princess, the black-robed members of the organization appeared in the fortress. "We are the special order working directly under the king," one of the black-robed men announced as they entered the fortress. "We came to take custody of the king and the other important members of the kingdom." The black-robed man removed the hood that was covering his face. Prince Lionel recognized the man because it was the man who had acted as the middleman between him and the organization. "Sir Callum, you're finally here," Prince Lionel greeted the man and walked in his direction. "You're here to ensure the safety of the king and the great nobles of the kingdom." "Yes, Your Highness." "Good. I'll leave my father in your hands." "Thank you, Your Highness," Callum replied before making a gesture. "Take the king and the other nobles. We are going to bring them back to the capital." Over 100, black-robed men scattered in different directions in order to carry out Callum's order. EST frowned, but he didn't do anything to prevent the unknown group from doing their duties. Although he didn't like the crown prince, the king's safety was his top priority. Also, a single glance was enough to tell him that Prince Lionel was familiar with the man named Callum. Even though he was still uneasy, there was nothing he could do in the current situation. Prince Lionel then dragged Callum to the side and the two were discussing something. Both men glanced in the direction of the Princess of Frisia from time to time as they continued their chat. "Tonight, Your Highness," Callum said. "I will personally escort the princess in your chamber tonight." "Good," Prince Lionel replied with a smile. "Make sure that she doesn't get hurt as much as possible." "We will do our best, Your Highness." However, the princess from Frisia had this troublesome ability. It's her charm, right? Prince Lionel was aware that Princess Sidonie had a special constitution. She was born with an unusual ability to make anyone around her fall madly in love with her. Naturally, he also thought that the feelings that he felt for the princess were due to her powers. However, the prince didn't care. Princess Sidonie was the girl he had chosen to become his bride. Whether his infatuation was due to her charm or not, he would not let anyone take her away from him. "Don't worry, Your Highness," Callum assured the prince. "We have prepared a way to capture her that will yield the least sacrifice." Prince Lionel nodded. As long as Princess Sidonie became his woman, he didn't care what method the organization used in order to subdue the princess. The two men talked more about how to carry out their plan, while the black-robed men used the power of wind to carry the statues towards the carriages that were stationed behind the fortress. Since they couldn't assassinate the king and the other high-ranking nobles, taking them to their hideout was the next best thing that they could do. Priscilla glanced at the princess standing by her side and the latter nodded her head. What Prince Lionel and Callum didn't know was that Priscilla had the uncanny ability to focus her sense of sight and hearing in a certain location. The vice-commander of the Anglo-Rhine Knight Order had heard the talk between the Crown Prince and Callum as if they were talking right next to her. "Knights, let's kill the ant army while they are still immobile," Priscilla ordered. "Although the ants seem to have been paralyzed, it's possible that they will recover soon. Now is the best time to eradicate them while they're still unable to defend themselves. Follow me." Yes. Just like the ants, the other magical beasts like the griffins and hippogriffs had suffered from the aurora borealis that descended from the sky. They were currently too weak to fly, so they couldn't accompany the knights to cull out the sea of ants that was right outside their fortress. Priscilla ordered the gates to be opened and the knights stormed out to start their extermination. Prince Lionel watched with an amused expression as the princess followed the knights in their undertaking. The young magicians and knights vented out their anger on the immobile ants and chopped them to pieces. Prince Lionel thought that this was a good opportunity to score some brownie points with the knights and the princess, so he decided to join in the massacre. However, before he could put his plan into motion, a loud screech tore through the skies. The blade wyvern, that had pulled the princess carriage, suddenly descended from the skies. Ironically, it still had the flying carriage attached to its body. Before anyone could react to its sudden appearance, Princess Sidonie grabbed Priscilla's hand and channeled her magic power into the bracelet that she wore on her right wrist. The two were enveloped with a radiant light and disappeared from where they stood. The blade wyvern then uttered another screech as it flapped its mighty wings and fled using its full speed. Prince Lionel's face contorted in shock and rage as he raised his hand to give out an order. "Capture the princess." Callum, who was standing beside him, immediately shot towards the sky like a rocket. He hadn't thought that the princess would try to escape from the fortress as soon as they arrived. His plan was to wait until nighttime to capture the princess without alerting anyone. Although he was a windbat lemage, he didn't have the ability to catch up to the blade wyvern, which was known as one of the fastest beasts that could fly in the sky. The only thing he could do was relay his message to all the members of the organization that the princess had escaped. The man wearing a red robe looked at the fleeing wyvern in the distance before shaking his head. "Fools! What do you think you are doing?" The man sighed and made a gesture. "Contact our agents in Frisia. Tell them to lay an ambush for the princess once she appears on their borders." "Yes, my lord." The black-robed man used a communication crystal to talk to his comrades that were currently taking over the kingdom in the Far East. As soon as the pseudo-11th circle spell descended from the sky, the organization had immediately moved to capture the princes and princesses of the royal families of the three major powers of the southern continent. They would pave the way for Prince Lionel to become the overlord of the entire southern continent, as per their agreement. "Princess, we should return to Frisia as soon as possible," Priscilla proposed. "I'm sure that the young warriors of our kingdom will come to your aid." Princess Sidonie shook her head as she looked outside of the carriage window. "Frisia is no longer safe. I'm afraid that my father has also turned into a statue. The survivors will either soon be imprisoned or ruled over by the organization that has used everyone as their chess pieces." The Princess of Frisia had known about the existence of the organization because she had charmed one of their members. It was quite unfortunate that the one she captured was only a grunt who was ordered to keep an eye on her. Even so, the information that she received from that charmed member was enough to tell her how dangerous her opponents were. Princess Sidonie and Morgana had no intention of falling into their hands. "Then, where should we go?" Priscilla asked. Princess Sidonie pondered for a while before relaying her intention to the blade wyvern. The wyvern screeched in agreement as it changed its course. "We're going to the Aenisha dynasty," Princess Sidonie answered. "Now is a good time to take control of an army." "Army?" Priscilla tilted her head. It was at that moment when a sudden realization hit her and her body shuddered uncontrollably. "Princess, when you said army, are you perhaps referring to the—" Princess Sidonie smiled and nodded her head. "I've always thought of doing this in the past, but with my current ability, it was impossible. However, right now, a golden opportunity has arrived. If I don't use this to my advantage, then I would be a fool." Morgana, who was inside Princess Sidonie's mindscape, nodded her head. "So what if they managed to take over the human kingdoms? They won't be able to defend it with their measly manpower." Princess Sidonie nodded in agreement with her other half. As long as she succeeded in taking control of her target, she wouldn't have to worry about anyone trying to capture her within the southern continent. After all, even though the organization was strong, they couldn't possibly fight off an army that numbered in the millions. Chapter 326, World-Shaking Battle of Epic Proportions. The giant golden ape stood when it saw the blood wyvern approach the airspace of Lant. After seeing Jekyll riding behind its back, it lowered its guard and sat near the entrance of the village. "Good job, Luffy," Jekyll greeted the golden ape. "Have there been any troublemakers as of late?" The Arabro shook its head and patted its chest twice to say that everything was in order. Jekyll nodded and thanked the guardian of Lant for doing its duty. The blood wyvern then landed in the center of the village where the town hall was located. A lady, wearing a black dress, was standing near the entrance. Celine watched as the blood wyvern landed in front of her before giving Jekyll an inquiring glance. "James, Damien, and Gideon have been turned into crystal statues," Jekyll said. "This spell is slightly different from the one that the organization had planned." Celine nodded. As a member of the organization, she was not affected by the continental spell because of the oath that she had made when she joined the group. I think it has something to do with that golden light, Celine replied. Yes. Jekyll agreed. I don't know how it happened, but I'm quite satisfied with the result. With this, the important figures of each kingdom are unharmed. However, I can't say the same for their heirs. A black mist separated from Jekyll's shadow. A few seconds later, Ezio appeared in front of the two with his trademark hood covering his face. How about the others? Ezio asked. Celine sighed and waved her hand. The doors of the town hall opened and several statues were found inside. Jekyll scanned the statues and saw several familiar faces. The most noticeable one was Owen. The old bastard had a lecherous smile on his face and had given the two thumbs-up pose before he was turned into a crystal statue. A small chuckle escaped Jekyll's lips because he understood the old man's antics. All the fighters of Lant had been gathered inside the town's hall. Barbados, and the other veterans of Lant had placed a powerful formation around and inside the town hall to prevent those who were not affiliated with Lant to enter its premises. How about the kids? Jekyll asked. How's Eve? The kids are fine, Celine answered. Eve is sleeping with the other kids in the underground shelter. All of them are safe. Jekyll and Ezio both nodded. They had already made enough preparations, so they were not worried about the safety of Lant. What they were worried about were Matthew's, Leah's, and William's conditions. Celine had sent Oliver to watch over William. The parrot monkey had sent her several messages these past few days and told her that William was safe for the time being. As for Matthew and Leah, Ezio would be flying towards Ravenlord Citadel to look for them. He would then bring them back to Lant, so that they would be protected by Jekyll and Celine. The only reason he had returned with Jekyll to Lant first was to make sure that the town was still in one piece. They were afraid that the organization would take this opportunity to attack the town while the veterans of Lant were in their helpless state. Although they couldn't destroy the statues, they could still carry them away from the town, in order to deal with them at a later time. Go and bring Matthew and Leah here, Jekyll said to Ezio. I'll watch over the town while you are away. Ezio nodded and jumped onto the back of the blood wyvern. It screeched once before flapping its wings to soar towards the sky. Jekyll and Celine watched as the assassin disappeared from the horizon before exchanging information with each other. William is in the Kirinter Mountains. Jekyll inquired. Yes, Celine answered. He's being well taken care of right now. Is that jealousy I hear from you, Celine? Jekyll teased. Our little Will is so popular with the ladies. I'm sure James will be laughing out loud when he marries many wives. Celine sighed and rubbed her forehead. When it came to William, her feelings were a bit complicated. The half-elf was her only disciple and she cared for him. Perhaps, she even cared for him more than she would care for her own family. This was why she had sent Oliver to watch over William and keep him safe, while she stayed in Lant to protect its residents from possible attacks from the organization. Since all of the veterans were out of commission, only Celine, Luffy, the wyverns, the mountain trolls, Jekyll, and Ezio were left to protect the town. Although they were few, they were a force to be reckoned with because all of them had the fighting force of centennial rank beasts and above. Seeing Celine's complicated expression, Jekyll decided to stop his teasing. He was about to discuss their next course of action when he felt a powerful presence nearing the town's gates. Luffy's roars echoed throughout the town as the sound of fighting ensued. The wyverns that were patrolling the skies screeched as they, too, descended to join the Ouroboros in battle. Jekyll and Celine glanced at each other before charging towards the gates to reinforce the beasts, who seemed to be fighting a hard battle. They still didn't know who, what, or how many attackers there were. All they knew was that they were more than capable of dealing with a Nile beast, and a dozen centennial wyverns, with ease. When Jekyll and Celine arrived at the gates, Luffy had already fallen on the ground with a broken arm and leg. His hateful roars, even in his injured state, showed that he was still prepared to fight this enemy that had appeared out of nowhere. The wyverns, on the other hand, were currently in a variety of injured states as they tried to prop themselves off the ground. In the midst of this carnage, a handsome middle-aged man, with long black hair that rested behind his back glanced at the two new arrivals. Celine's face paled because the presence the man was radiating was a rank that she was very familiar with. The demigod. Celine gasped. The black-haired, middle-aged man raised an eyebrow as he looked at Celine. He eyed her from head to foot before shifting his gaze to the dentist of Lant who was glaring back at him. Stand back, Celine, Jekyll stepped forward to confront the man. I'll handle him. The dentist of Lant changed into his true form and roared before charging fearlessly at the demigod who was causing a ruckus in his domain. The middle-aged man snorted before flying towards the sky. Jekyll followed suit and soon, a world-shaking battle of epic proportions was fought over the skies of Lant. Celine watched in awe as the gusts of wind buffeted her from the ground. This was the first time she had witnessed a battle of this level. Seeing that the two powerful beings were not holding back their punches, she hurriedly activated the defenses of Lant to prevent any damages from befalling the town. Although the children were safe inside the shelter that they had made long ago, Celine didn't want to take any chances. Why? Because a single attack from the demigod could easily wipe the entirety of Lant from the face of the southern continent. Celine was also not confident that she would be able to survive an attack of such magnitude. Right now, the only thing that stood between total annihilation and survival lay in the hands of the dentist of Lant, who always had a smile on his face. Chapter 327, Williams and Shaw's Collaboration Part 1. Dark clouds hung over the heavenly domain as William looked at the giant gate in the distance. Several days had passed since his first attempt to enter the heavenly gate, and his injuries were now fully recovered. He was thinking of a way to bypass its defenders. After failing the first time, he knew that the same trick wouldn't work twice. The Celestial Army was now aware of his ability, and the commanders of the Celestial Knights had congregated near the gate. Zhu and Xia sat beside William as they ate several grilled fishes that they had caught in a nearby river. They were waiting for William's second attempt to reach the gate. The first one caught them completely by surprise, and their admiration for the boy was raised to a higher level. Even so, both of them knew that the boy would have to try something new if he wished to overcome the obstacles that stood in his way. William's eyes narrowed as he did several calculations inside his head. Frankly, if that Crimson Knight hadn't appeared, he would have cleared the trial already. However, there was no use crying over spilt milk, and William wasn't the type to mull over this mishap for a long time. Zhu, isn't this trial unreasonable? William inquired. Has anyone cleared this trial in the past? Zhu was about to say that the trial was indeed impossible to clear, but an image appeared inside his mind. A powerful troublemaker that defied heaven's will had once challenged the Celestial Army alone and actually won. This was a story of thousands of years ago when he was still just a captain in the Celestial Army. It took him 1,000 years to climb to the rank of general, only to be exiled in his 300th year of serving the Jade Emperor. Oink! There was one person that cleared it in the past, Zhu said with undisguised admiration. He was an irregular that broke all the rules of the world. Since then, no one else has cleared this trial and all souls that failed were sent to the Cycle of Reincarnation. William was surprised because he never thought that there was actually a person that had managed to clear the domain. He then tried to pry more information from Zhu, but the pig demon didn't say more about that legendary being that challenged the Celestial Army and won. The half-elf looked at the gate and sighed. He then created several different colored lollipops in his hand. William used the quota for the number of lollipops that he could produce in a day. After doing this, the red-headed boy placed them inside his pocket, causing it to bulge. He currently didn't have any storage items in which to store the lollipops he created. The only thing he could do was carry them along with him. Xia, can I ask you for a favor? William inquired. It depends on what kind of favor you want, Xia replied. He didn't reject or accept William's proposed question because he was also curious about what the boy planned to do. William grinned as he explained the plan he had in mind. If possible, I want you to. After he finished making his preparations, William summoned his staff and trudged forward. He placed a chocolate lollipop inside his mouth as he prepared to fight. His mind cleared up as soon as the chocolate taste spread inside his mouth. His fear and anxiety also decreased by a good margin. Right now, William was in his A-game mode. William ran towards the heavenly gate using the movement technique that he had practiced many times in the past. The weakest celestial knights that guarded the gates were of gold rank. According to Celine and the others, William's rank was in the gold rank as well. But, that was when he was still in training. Now, William had gone past that rank and had entered the initial stages of the platinum rank. When William was only a mile away from the heavenly gate, hundreds of golden knights charged in his direction. Some of them flew, some ran, while others allowed their comrades to engage William while they prepared for anything unexpected. They were not fighting as individual fighters. They were fighting as an organized group that had protected the heavenly gate for thousands of years. When the first batch of fighters were about to clash with William, the boy threw 4 grey lollipops under his feet. A cloud of smoke that extended up to 30 square meters covered William's surroundings. The celestial warriors didn't enter the cloud of smoke and merely extended their palms forward. They roared and their aura exploded from within their bodies. It caused a repelling effect that blew away the cloud. However, when the smoke was dispersed, the shepherd was nowhere to be seen. It didn't take long for them to realize that William had vanished into thin air. Search for him, the captain of the Celestial Army ordered. Go. He has to be here somewhere. Yes, sir. The 100-strong regiment swept the place where William disappeared, while those guarding the gate raised their guard. They already knew what the boy was capable of, so they extended their senses to the limit. Even the Crimson Knight floated above the battlefield and scanned the surroundings using his aura. Still, they weren't able to find the boy who had completely vanished from their sight. Meanwhile, 1,000 meters underground. Relentless Dragon Assault. William thrust his spear forward in order to create a tunnel in front of him. The dirt flew in the air, but the boy didn't mind it. He had his eyes closed, as he continued his relentless assault to create a path under the ground. Soon, the dust and debris that he had made vanished into thin air as a small black hole sucked it all up. Earlier, William asked Xia to send him 1,000 meters under the ground where he would create a tunnel to sneak up to the heavenly gate. The smokescreen he made earlier was just a distraction in order for him to disappear in front of the watchful eyes of the Celestial Army. Since the lollipop was made out of the power of divinity, the Celestial Army who had good vision was unable to penetrate the smoke that William created. Because of this, he was able to execute his plan and made the entire Celestial Army feel constipated. Since they couldn't find William, they were forced to be on high alert, lest the boy slipped past their defenses again. William dug and dug and dug some more, all while the small black hole sucked up all the debris that he had made. Xia, who was above the ground, had a mischievous look on his face as he glanced at the panicking Celestial Army in the distance. Zhu, on the other hand, was laughing hard because he knew what the boy was doing. His piggy lips curled up into a smirk as his beady eyes narrowed into slits. He was looking forward to seeing the result of William's daring plan. An hour passed then too. The Celestial Army kept on searching, and even the Crimson Knight landed in front of Xia and Zhu to interrogate them to see if they knew where the boy was. Naturally, the two kept mum and only gave the Crimson Knight a devilish smile. The demonic pig even joked that William had turned into a flea and was currently on the head of one of the Golden Knights that attacked him earlier. This may have sounded like a ridiculous idea, but the Celestial Army took it seriously. There were some souls, who came from other worlds, that had a transformation ability. In the past, there had been a challenger that could transform into a stone. He almost succeeded in crossing through the gate. However, a guard, who suddenly felt the need to do some stretching exercises, accidentally stepped on him, ending his transformation spell. It was a bitter pill that the Celestial Army had to take back then. Even though Zhu was just joking, they still couldn't stop themselves from thinking about the what if he is telling the truth scenario. Because of this, the hundreds of Golden Knights were ordered to stand in a line while those with powerful senses inspected their hair and armor and anywhere else a flea could run to and hide. This made the pig demon roar in laughter, which annoyed the more than 100 Golden Knights that were being inspected by their superiors. Even Sha, who had a serious disposition, had a smile on his face as he observed from afar. What William was doing was not just merely creating a tunnel to reach the heavenly gate. He was working hand in hand with Sha to create a surprise for the Celestial Army that seemed impossible to defeat. Chapter 328, Williams and Sha's Collaboration Part 2. A day passed. 3 days passed. Many more days had passed by since William's disappearance, and the Celestial Army's faces had started to get irritable. They had been on high alert for the past 6 days, and some of them even felt constipated because they were always on guard for William's sneak attack. It was as if there was an itch inside their body that wouldn't go away no matter how hard they tried to scratch it. While all of this was happening, the half-elf that they had been looking for was snoring under the earth after working hard for the past 6 days. William was very tired. He knew that there's no way that he would win against an army that numbered in the millions if he faced them head-on. This was why he prepared a surprise for them, thousands of meters under their feet. At the start, it was only him working alone, but after a day, Sha decided to join in on the fun and helped him clear the land beneath the earth. The sand demon that was seated right beside Zhu was only a sand clone that Sha had created in order to prevent the Celestial Army from noticing anything suspicious. The pig demon was their lookout that would warn Sha if anyone started to come near their location. Seriously, this plan of yours is so evil, Will, Sha muttered as he glanced at the snoring half-elf beside him. The sand demon was also very tired, but a hint of anticipation could be seen on his face. Tomorrow, Sha thought. All of this will end tomorrow. Sha slowly closed his eyes as well. Their work had been completed. All that was left to do was rest and recover their strength for the big battle that would happen the next day. The gods and the immortal heroes were quite interested in the outcome of this trial. They couldn't see where William was, but they didn't care. For them, who had lived in the heavens for thousands of years, this was first-class entertainment. However, William's disappearance had made some of the gods and immortal heroes return to their duties. They had waited a few days, but the half-elf was nowhere to be seen. They just asked their friends and acquaintances to call them when the battle began once again. The king sipped his wine cup as his brows furrowed into a frown. He had used his eyes to scan over the battlefield and the boy couldn't be found anywhere. The other warriors did the same and got the same results. What did this mean? It meant that William was currently not on the battlefield. Since that was the case, there was only one place he could be hiding. Naturally, if the king and the other immortal warriors had thought of this, the gods and the Celestial Army thought of it as well. The Crimson Knight had already ordered the knights to use their aura to attack the ground under them, in order to force the boy out, but it was to no avail. When they started their attacks, Cher had taken William very deep under the ground where the shockwaves wouldn't reach him. After a full day of bombardment, the Celestial Army stopped. They had already done their best, but the rat that was hiding underground refused to come out no matter what. What they didn't know was that their attacks had unknowingly helped the half-elf loosen the hard layers of soil under the army's feet. Because of this, the drilling process became faster. William and Sha didn't have to forcefully break these solid rocks and soil, which made their work less troublesome. They even thanked the Celestial Army in their hearts because they had made their jobs easier. When the 7th day came, the Celestial Army was at their wits' end. They had finally reached their limit and even the slightest movement would trigger them into action. What they didn't know was that this was also a part of William's plan. After working with Ezio for 6 months, the boy had learned how to create tension. Ezio was an expert in making his victims feel uncomfortable. He would never give them a moment of rest. He would make them feel as if they were being watched all the time, which would put stress on their bodies and minds. William had employed the same techniques with the Celestial Army with the help of Sha. The sand demon would make certain parts of the ground shake, rise, and create dust clouds which would prompt the army to go and investigate it. The Celestial Army had grown tired of this harassment and just ignored these random movements from the ground. When the sun finally set, and darkness covered the domain, William's eyes opened. A wicked grin appeared on his face as he unwrapped a black lollipop before placing it in his mouth. Is it time? Sha asked. He then stood up and crossed his arms over his chest. William nodded, it's showtime. Perhaps it was just a coincidence, but on the 7th day, when William decided to execute his plans, there was no moon in the sky. The battlefield around the heavenly gate was shrouded in darkness, and only the light within its portal could be seen for miles. A golden knight yawned in order to release the pent-up exhaustion inside his body. Soon, more yawns spread across the battlefield as the other soldiers gave in to their body's instincts. They said that yawns were contagious. When one person yawned, everyone would yawn as well. After the golden knight finished yawning, he felt something brush off his body, like a passing breeze. The knight scanned his surroundings, but didn't see anything suspicious. Thinking that he was just imagining things, he returned to his vigil in order to prevent the half-elf from getting past the heavenly gate. William slowly made his way towards the heavenly gate with steady steps. The lollipop inside his mouth was the black lollipop that allowed him to use the passive ability Cloak of Darkness. As long as the lollipop was inside his lips, he could use the cover of the night to move without being detected. Naturally, this skill had its limitations. Powerful individuals, who were able to see through illusions and temperature would be able to detect him right away. Fortunately, none of the knights that he had passed by had these abilities. Every so slowly, the gap between William and the heavenly gate lessened. When he was only a few hundred meters away from the gate, William's steps became slower. He was doing his best to create the least amount of noise in order to prevent others from detecting his presence. It was one of the things he learned from Ezio during his training, and so far, things were going smoothly, that was until... Achoo! One of the guards sneezed and everyone looked in his direction. The Celestial Knight was embarrassed and bowed his head in apology to his superior. However, before he could even raise his head, another sneeze sounded right beside him. William hurriedly covered his nose, to prevent himself from sneezing one more time. It was quite unfortunate that when the guard sneezed, he sneezed right on William's face, which irritated the half-elf's nose. The half-elf's body tensed as he remained completely still. A few seconds later, several auras washed over his body, making it stiffen. William sighed as he took the lollipop out from inside his mouth. His cover had already been blown, so there was no use hiding it. You know, you should really cover your nose when you sneeze, William nagged at the knight that sneezed on his face. You lack manners. The Celestial Knight grinned as he nodded, sorry. I'll do better next time. That you should. William wiped his face using his shirt. He then gave the Celestial Knights that had already encircled him a refreshing smile before waving his hand. Bye. The knights closed in and hacked William with their weapons, but the boy remained unmoved. When their attacks hit the boy's body, it collapsed and turned into a pile of sand. He's here, the captain of the Celestial Knights shouted. The boy is here. The powerful captains of each squad activated their auras and scanned their surroundings. After 7 days of waiting, their target had once again made himself known. Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William's voice echoed eerily in the dark night. Blitzer railgun. The Black Knight commander near the gate immediately turned himself into a giant and used his body to block the entrance of the heavenly gate. The Crimson commander stood in front of the giant and unsheathed his blade, while expanding his senses to the limit. Suddenly, the Crimson Knight slashed his sword at something, only to find himself being covered in a sticky substance. After taking a whiff of it, the great general of the Celestial Army identified it as grease. The Crimson Knight frowned and used his aura to repel the foreign substance from his body. Although the knight wasn't fully certain, he could have sworn that he had heard a low chuckle the moment the grease splattered on his body. It was as if William was making fun of him and the Crimson Knight hated it. The battlefield once again descended into darkness because they had lost the trail of the boy once again. A minute later, a loud explosion was heard a few meters away from the heavenly gate, prompting everyone to look in that direction. William stood at the center of several knights that had lost their consciousness. The boy casually unwrapped a chocolate lollipop in front of everyone, while his green eyes glowed in the darkness. He then pointed his staff at the heavenly gate and said, Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William's voice echoed eerily in the dark night. Blitzer railgun. William disappeared from where he stood and the Crimson Knight immediately went to block his trajectory. However, nothing happened. Soon, several loud voices echoed across the battlefield and all of them were saying the same thing. Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William's voice echoed eerily in the dark night. Blitzer railgun. Several whooshing sounds followed after and several projectiles flew towards the heavenly gate from the darkness of the night. Those with strong senses were able to pinpoint these flying objects, and went to intercept them. Suddenly, a blinding white light descended upon the battlefield. The light came from the flying projectiles that the commanders of the Celestial Army tried to intercept. They were the concentrated white lollipops that William had fused together, to create an intense blinding light that forced the knights to close their eyes. Several of these lights appeared at the battlefield at the same time, which forced the defenders to shield their eyes for a brief moment, due to its intensity. However, what followed next made the gods and immortal heroes suck their breaths in surprise. Omi wa Mao. Those were the last words that the Celestial Army heard before the ground from under their feet collapsed, sending all of them falling into a huge pit that was over 1,000 meters deep. Chapter 329, Break all walls that stand before me. Part 1. Roars of surprise and anger reverberated in the night, as the Celestial Army that was several hundred meters away from the heavenly gate, fell into the pit that William and Cher had painstakingly created many days ago. The two had made sure to dig deep enough around the heavenly gate so that all the guards stationed near it would be caught in their trap. This also prevented the other Celestial Knights, who were stationed farther away from the heavenly gate, to reinforce their comrades from the boy who was currently hovering in midair, thanks to Shaw's ability. When their trap activated, William threw several yellow lollipops towards the giant that was blocking the heavenly gate with its body. The lollipop looked so harmless, that the giant ignored them, and focused his attention on the hovering boy in the sky. The moment one of the yellow lollipops hit his body, a powerful force made him stagger, forcing him to take a step backwards. The power of the yellow lollipop was a knockback spell, which was similar to William's magnum burst. The only difference was that this spell disregarded the enemy's size and strength. As long as it hits a target, that target would be knocked back regardless of how sturdy or strong it is. The giant wanted to recover his balance, but William had perfectly timed the interval of the lollipops he threw. One could even say that the moment the first lollipop hit the giant, his fate was already sealed. The giant was forced to take several steps back until his entire body passed through the heavenly gate. Lily, who was watching William employ the power of her divinity, jumped like a fangirl and raised her small fists as she shouted William's name. The giant wasn't the only one that was forced by William to enter the gate, the poor Crimson Knight was also pushed back along with the giant due to that brief moment when they covered their eyes. Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William said as he pointed his wooden staff towards the heavenly gate that was free from obstruction. Blitzer railgun. Earlier, William shouted his ability in order to make the Celestial Knights panic. He was only using a bit of psychology in order to force them to make choices that would work in his favor. Naturally, his efforts paid off and he was able to eliminate two of the greatest threats that prevented him from entering the heavenly gate, by using the white lollipops to blind them temporarily. William's body merged with his staff, and it flew towards the heavenly gate at the speed of sound, which was now devoid of defenders. The staff was about to pass through the portal when a golden shield, that had the emblem of the sun in its center, blocked his path. William's fusion with the staff broke apart as he was repelled from the gate by a powerful force. He was about to fall into the same pit that he had dug earlier when a cloud of sand caught him in midair. Very good, a taunting voice said from behind the shield. A being worthy to be David's successor. However, did you think that I would just sit back and watch you clear this trial, boy? William wiped the blood, that had emerged from the corner of his lips due to the collision against the divine shield that blocked his path, away. He then glared at the hateful god that had insulted Gavin in the temple. Lug, David's friend and one of the gods that belonged to the righteous faction stared back at the young boy with a teasing smile plastered on his face. I wasn't able to put you in your place in the temple because the gods there need to follow certain rules, Lug sneered. However, inside this domain, we are allowed to descend in order to test worthy souls and keep them from entering the temple of the gods. Don't worry, on behalf of David, I will beat you up, but still leave a breath in your body. This will be your punishment for insulting a god. Lug summoned his spear and pointed it at the pit that had trapped the celestial army. Immediately, the ground rose up bringing the knights back to the surface. The bewildered warriors looked at William before looking at the god that was standing right in front of the gate. Fools, what are you looking at? Lug scoffed. Capture the boy and beat him up for me. Yes. As soon as Lug gave an order, the soldiers activated their weapon auras and attacked William at the same time. Facing thousands of energy attacks from all directions, Cher hurriedly pulled William away, preventing the attacks from hitting the boy. However, the celestial knights that could fly had already taken action and engaged the boy in the air. Quick shot war art, fusion form. Blitzer railgun. William shot out towards Zhu and Cher who were standing in the distance. When he was close enough, he hurriedly cancelled the effects of the war art fusion. Cher used his powers to catch the boy and prevent him from taking any further damage. The sand demon lowered William on the ground before checking his condition. Zhu, on the other hand, stood in front of the two and raised the rake in his hands as he took a fighting stance. The demonic pig knew that the celestial army would not let the boy go after the embarrassment that they had suffered at his hand. Although William and him had a rough start, Zhu had recognized the boy's determination and tenacity. He also cursed the bastardly god, Lug, in his heart for bullying a child. Zhu knew that a battle was inevitable, but he didn't mind. Even though he and Shan knew that there was no hope in winning against the celestial army, they wouldn't just stand by and let William get beaten up under their watch. Meanwhile in the temple of the gods. You bastard! Lily roared in anger. I'll beat the crap out of you. Lily's divinity exploded from her body as she prepared to descend to the heavenly domain. Since Lug had insulted Gavin, and tried to attack William, the lowly goddess had added the sun god to her blacklist. Although she belonged to the neutral faction, that didn't mean that she would allow other gods to bully the boy that she had given her divinity to. Issei had already unsheathed the dagger in his hands and his eyes were cold and murderous. Just like Lily, he also planned to descend as well and stab the god of bastards that dared to bully his younger brother. William forced himself to stand by using the wooden staff in his hand. He knew that his trial was about to end, but he was unwilling to let it end this way. At the very least, before all the bones in his body were broken, he would do his best to smash his staff into the god's face. That is the only way that William could think of to erase the gloating smile on Lug's annoying face. Chapter 330, Break all walls that stand before me. Part 2. Lily and Issei were about to descend to the heavenly domain when David reached out to grab their arms. Wait, David said. Don't go. Shut up, old coot. Lily protested. I don't care if Lug is your friend. I'll beat the crap out of him. David, let me go, Issei said without turning his head to look at his friend. He had already decided to battle it out with Lug and make him pay for his arrogance. I understand that the two of you are angry, but if you go, this will only escalate into a brawl between gods, David replied firmly. If one of you goes down there right now, the rest of the righteous faction will follow. It will not just be a 2-on-1, a quarter of the gods in the temple will become involved as well. So? Issei asked back. This time he turned around to face David. So what if this becomes a full-blown brawl? If they send 100, I'll stab 100. If they send 1,000, I'll stab 1,000. David sighed, but his grip on the arms of his two friends remained firm. This is a critical time for William. Just wait for a while. Wait? Wait for what? Lily stomped her foot angrily. Wait for him to get ganged up on. The lowly goddess was one of the most adorable gods in the temple, but when she got angry, she was like a fearless honey badger that would even attack a lion. Please, for William's sake, trust me, David replied. If you go down there, he will miss a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. Issei frowned, but didn't make a move to pry off David's hands from his arm. He glanced at the red-headed boy as he gripped the dagger in his hand more firmly. 10 minutes, Issei stated. If nothing happens in 10 minutes, I'm going down there. David nodded. Okay. Just wait 10 minutes. Lily snorted, but she had already summoned a candy cane in her hand. Since Issei had compromised, she would also do the same. However, after 10 minutes, even if David pleaded, she would go down to the heavenly domain and smack Lugga's face using the candy cane in her hand. The king held the wine cup in his hand and remained completely still. He looked at the battlefield as if remembering a time in the distant past. A past when the worlds were still at war with each other and the gods looked down on mortals and immortals alike. When the first celestial knights descended from the sky, Zhu roared and waved the nine-toothed rake in his hand to create a tornado. The flying knights were sucked up along with the soldiers on the ground. Zhu may be a pig demon right now, and devoid of most of his divinity, but he was once a great general of the heavenly army that served under the Jade Emperor. He still had aces under his sleeves and 100 gold knights would not be able to defeat him. Can you move, William? Sha asked. Yes, William replied. Sorry for including you and Zhu in this mess. Sha snorted as he faced the army that was nearing their location. This army will not let any of us go, so I say we charge our way forward. I agree, brother. Zhu grinned. This scene reminds me of the time when we fought those monsters from the abyss. My blood is boiling. Oink. Sha chuckled because he remembered the event that Zhu was talking about. Indeed, that battle was an unforgettable one because the odds were not in their favor. Even so, Zhu and him were able to escape it with their lives and make their way back to the heavenly palace to receive their punishment from the emperor. Listen, William. We will pave the path for you, Sha declared. Don't worry about us. Just focus on reaching that gate. Do you understand? Yes, William answered with determination. Since Zhu and Sha were willing to help him, he wouldn't reject their offer. He just channeled his aura in his wooden staff and prepared himself to fight to the death. Go! Zhu roared as he took the lead as the vanguard. He waved his rake left and right and sent the celestial knights flying as if they were dry leaves that were being cleaned up by the rake in his hand. Suddenly, everything became dark as millions of arrows flew in their direction. Sha roared and summoned the sand from the jug behind his back, to form a dome of earth to protect them from the rain of arrows. The arrows embedded themselves in the moving dome, making it look like a giant porcupine, but the three under it were unharmed. A few seconds later, Sha dispelled the earth dome and manipulated the sand to swirl around them. They looked at the tens of thousands of warriors that were surging towards them like a swarm of locusts. Zhu increased his size until he became a 4-meter-tall giant demonic pig. His eyes glowed red as he entered his rage mode. He bulldozed through the army in front of him like a tank, swinging his rake with the intention of slaughtering everything in his path. Naturally, Sha and William weren't idle either. They fought side by side with Zhu and repelled the celestial army to the best of their abilities. The gods and immortal heroes were impressed by their battle prowess and even thought that they might just be able to make it. Unfortunately, courage and determination alone could not overcome the disparity in numbers. Like a swarm of ants, they outnumbered their opponents 400,000 against one. The first to fall was Zhu. Although the pig demon fought valiantly, his enemies were not pushovers either. No one in the celestial army was weak. They were also great warriors when they were still alive, and they had retained their skills even after they passed over to the afterlife. The second to fall was Sha. He did his best to protect Zhu and William from the merciless onslaught, but one of the surviving Black Knights was able to pass through his defenses and delivered a mighty blow to the sand demon's chest. After that, it was William's turn to suffer. The celestial army pinned him down and delivered countless blows to his body, which made Lily roar in anger. Amidst the beating, William's determination never wavered. He fought, tooth and nail, even biting the hands of those that pinned him down with his bloody teeth. It was at that moment when a string of words appeared inside his mind. Gripping his staff, William shouted and unleashed a magnum burst which sent the knights around him flying. That small gap immediately closed as the enraged knights charged at him with bloodshot eyes. Break all walls that stand before me! William roared before he was pinned down and pummeled by the celestial knights, who were duty-bound to bring him to his knees. It was then when a dominating shout answered him from the heavens. Sweep away all adversaries! Ryu! Jing! Bang! A giant golden metallic staff descended from the heavens. It was at least thousands of meters long, and 100 meters wide. It created a powerful shockwave that blasted away all the celestial knights that were pinning William, Zhu, and Sha to the ground. William panted and opened his eyes that had become swollen from the beating. Although it was still dark, there was some kind of golden light that allowed him to see his surroundings. The first thing the half-elf saw was a person's back. It wasn't as big as his grandpa's, but William felt that this was a back that wouldn't bend to anyone. He then raised his gaze and saw a golden metallic staff that glowed brightly in the darkness. The boy realized that this was where the light was coming from. As if sensing his gaze, the person turned around to look down on him. Although William's vision was a bit blurry, he could somehow detect that the edges of the person's lips in front of him were curled up into a smirk. What's your name, kid? A playful voice asked. William forced his bloody lips to open as he spoke out his name. William. My name is William, Your Excellency. A chuckle escaped the person's lips as he crouched down to offer William an outstretched hand. Due to the person's closeness, William was able to see his facial features. It was then when he realized that the person who came to his aid wasn't human. It was a monkey with golden eyes that seemed to blaze like flames amidst the darkness. You have a good name, kid, the monkey replied. From now on, you can call upon me in your time of need. The monkey had a mischievous look on his face as he grabbed hold of William's hand, giving it a firm shake. Your Excellency, what is your name? William asked. Although he had a nagging feeling that he already knew the identity of this legendary hero, he still dared to ask to confirm his suspicions. Me? I am none other than the handsome Monkey King, the monkey declared in a teasing tone. The great sage that equals heaven. The one and only. Sun Wukong. Chapter 331, Our Battle Will Be Legendary Part 1. Sun Wukong, William thought as he firmly gripped the Monkey King's hand. The latter then helped him to stand on his own 2 feet before looking at the celestial army that had reformed their ranks. Clearly, they wouldn't allow William to pass through the gate without a fight. Kid, I'll take care of the small fries, but you will have to take care of that one over there, okay? Sun Wukong twirled the golden staff in his hand and pointed at Lug, who stood in front of the heavenly gate like a gatekeeper. Okay, William readily agreed. Sun Wukong patted his shoulder in a casual manner. Relax, I'll lend you my power when you fight against him. As long as this king is around, you don't have to worry about anything. Sun Wukong pulled a few hairs from his head and gave William a wink before blowing them off his hand. These strands of hair flew in the air for a brief moment before transforming into exact replicas of the Monkey King. Zhu and Cher had propped themselves up from the ground while the two had been talking. Although they had received heavy injuries, they glared fearlessly at the celestial army in front of them. The pig demon and the sand demon raised their weapons high with arrogance. Clearly, they wanted to give the knights some payback for ganging up on them. Let's go. Sun Wukong grinned. Observe carefully, William. You need to understand how my abilities work. William nodded his head as he ran behind the Monkey King and his clones. Within his status page, the name of Sun Wukong shone brightly in gold in bold letters. This meant that the Monkey King had been registered under his heroic avatar skill. What did this mean? It meant that he could use the Monkey King's abilities for a short period of time when he activates the heroic avatar skill. Heroic avatar allows the shepherd to use the power of an immortal heroic hero that protects the temple of the 10,000 gods. This skill only lasts for an hour. During that time, the shepherd will be able to wield all the abilities of the immortal hero Sun Wukong. This also includes the battle regalias and weapons that belong to him. This skill can only be used once a week. Current heroic avatar, Sun Wukong. Heroic rank, Immortal Saint, High. William noticed some distinct changes in the description of the skill. Before, the description of the heroic avatar only lasted for 15 minutes and could be used once a day. Now, it could be used for an hour and had a cooldown time of 1 week. The half-elf guessed that the changes in the skill's description had something to do with the heroic spirit that had been registered as his heroic avatar. Even so, he was quite thankful that the immortal hero that had appeared before him was quite powerful. William focused his attention on the Monkey King's fighting style so that he would be able to utilize his hero's strength when he activated his heroic avatar. The Monkey King's clones rampaged across the battlefield. The golden staves in their hands extended several meters long as they swept across the battlefield, while doing their monkey antics. Shouts of pain and helplessness erupted throughout the celestial army as the overpowered Monkey King swaggered towards the heavenly gate, sending anyone who stood in his way flying in every direction. Devastate all that stands in my way. Sun Wukong ordered. Ryu. Jing. Bang. The golden staff in Sun Wukong's hand grew in size until it was 300 meters long and over 2 meters thick. The Monkey King slammed it against the ground, creating a powerful shockwave that blew all the celestial knights away. It was as if he had parted the sea with that strike, allowing himself, William, Zhu, Sha and his clones to pass through the defenders with ease. Lily giggled as she cheered for the Monkey King's one-sided massacre that offered no mercy to his enemies. The lowly goddess had been raring to rampage a few minutes ago, but David had prevented her from descending to the heavenly domain. After the appearance of Sun Wukong, her anger disappeared completely and she was now cheering for the monkey wholeheartedly. As for Issei, he had a smile on his face as he nodded his head in satisfaction. Just like Lily, the harem god had been itching for a battle, but he put it aside for now since the most troublesome monkey in the celestial world had appeared on the battlefield. The Jade Emperor sighed as he watched Sun Wukong laugh out loud as he brute-forced his way through the sea of defenders. It reminded him of the time when the Monkey King had defied his decree and fought off the heavenly army of his Jade Palace. I almost pity the celestial knights, but this battle is far from over, the Jade Emperor thought as he looked at Lug, who seemed mildly amused by Sun Wukong's dominant performance. Just like everyone else, Lug had restrictions that were applied to him when he entered the heavenly domain. If Sun Wukong's rank was at the peak of a saint, Lug's rank was that of a myriad beast at its peak. Saints would always be weaker than myriad beasts, but the Monkey King didn't shy away from fighting against strong opponents. This was why the heavenly army had lost repeatedly against him in the past. Sun Wukong was practically one of the most invincible beings in all of creation because his body couldn't be damaged by anything. Although he wasn't a god, he was still a force to reckon with. Not to mention, his weapon, Ryu Jing Bang, was capable of injuring, and dealing lethal damage to, gods. After an hour of intense fighting, the majority of the celestial knights were lying on the ground, unconscious. The surviving knights knew that it was a hopeless battle, so they decided to stand aside and let the king, who had been given the title Heaven's Equal, to pass unimpeded. Sun Wukong didn't make things hard for the knights who refused to fight and let them be. Soon, they arrived in front of the heavenly gate where the god of the sun, Lug, was waiting for them. All right, you're up, kid, Sun Wukong said as he handed his golden staff to William. Knock his teeth out. William nodded and accepted Ryu Jing Bang from Sun Wukong. The moment he held the weapon in his hand, he could feel an overwhelming strength wash over his body. The Monkey King turned into particles of light and flew towards William's chest, merging with him. All of William's injuries recovered at an astonishing rate as if he had drunk one of Jekyll's regeneration potions. Lug held his shield in his left hand, and a red spear in his right. A sneer was plastered on his face as he pointed his weapon in William's direction. William snorted as he twirled the golden staff in his hand. A metallic ding echoed across the battlefield as he slammed the staff on the ground. Finally a worthy opponent, Lug declared. Our battle will be legendary. William ignored his words, as he pointed the tip of the golden staff at Lug's face. No, B*TCH. It's clobbering time. Chapter 332, Our battle will be legendary Part 2. Lug laughed when he heard William's snarky reply. His laughter only lasted for a brief moment before he threw his shield towards the boy without warning. William stepped aside to dodge the attack, but his battle instincts told him to get away as soon as he could. The half-elf didn't think twice and jumped back decisively. It was at that moment when Lug's body materialized and swapped places with the shield. The god then thrust his spear in William's direction, shooting a beam of light. William somersaulted in the air to evade Lug's attack before making a sweeping motion with the golden staff in his hand. The staff extended and swung towards the god who was looking at William in disdain. Before the staff could even hit him, Lug disappeared from the ground and reappeared 100 meters above William. He then spread his hands wide as he looked up into the heavens. Praise the sun! Lug shouted. Suddenly the darkness of the night disappeared, and a giant blazing sun appeared in the heavens. Lug's body turned golden as the spear in his hand turned dark red. Bloom in the battlefield. Lug declared with arrogance. Fleur du Soleil. The hair on William's neck stood on end as he faced the familiar attack that he had used back in Hestia. He already had his suspicions that the Sun Knight job class and Lug were connected with each other. He just didn't expect that even his weapon, Soleil, was an artifact that originally belonged to the sun god. Naturally, the spear that Lug used wasn't Soleil. He had lent Soleil to Astrid who, in turn, gave it to one of her warriors who fought for humanity during the Dark Era in Hestia. However, since the weapon originally belonged to him, Lug was able to use Soleil's power, just like William was able to use the lightning god war arts in battle. The flaming spear flew towards William, leaving trails of flames in the sky. This attack was similar to a nuclear strike that could wipe out entire armies with a single attack. William's Sun Knight job class was only able to bring out a fraction of Soleil's true power. The half-elf didn't dare to try and find out how strong this attack could be after being used by a god. Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William said with determination. Blitzer railgun. William fused with his weapon and shot towards the heavens, evading the flaming spear. While he was soaring towards the sky at the speed of sound, a thought crossed through his mind. I feel like I'm forgetting something, William thought as he traveled thousands of meters above the ground in a matter of seconds. Meanwhile on the ground. FCK. Oink. Zhu exclaimed as he realized the great danger that they were about to face. Run. The pig demon ran with everything he had because he had no intention of turning into roasted pork. Fool. Shag grabbed his friend's arm before using his ability to dive under the ground. A few seconds later, a world-shaking explosion erupted on the battlefield. The Celestial Army, who tried to flee, was immediately enveloped by a radiant light before their bodies turned into ashes. Despite Zhu's and Sha's attempt to escape underground in order to prevent injury and death, they were not spared from the explosion. The two received serious injuries as the shockwave from the blast descended on them with a vengeance. Fortunately, the two of them were strong individuals and the powerful attack didn't take their lives. William had already cancelled his ability mid-flight and looked down on the devastation on the ground. A blazing 10-mile crater had formed in the ground where the spear landed, turning everything around it into a sea of flames. William had to admit that it was quite an impressive sight, and he hoped that there wouldn't come a time when he had to use a similar attack back in his world. It was an attack that had the potential to wipe out entire cities off the face of the earth. After the initial shock had passed, William summoned a cloud using the Monkey King's power and mounted it. He then charged at Lug, who looked back at him with a contemptuous gaze. Immolate. Solar flare. Lug pointed his finger at William. Immediately after that, a 30-meter miniature sun formed in front of William. The sun expanded its size and was about to explode when William thrust his spear towards it. Not happening. William roared. The golden staff in his hand extended and its thickness expanded to over tens of meters. The golden tip collided with the miniature sun and pushed it along with its descent towards the arrogant sun god, whose expression immediately became serious when his own attack was directed back at him. Not only that, William's attack was right behind the solar flare, which made the sun god take these two attacks seriously. Aegis. Lug stood firm and held the shield in front of him. The shield expanded until it was 3 meters wide, shielding Lug's entire body behind it. A powerful explosion made the sky tremble as the solar flare erupted right in front of Lug's golden shield. A few seconds later, the nearly 40-meter thick staff slammed against the shield, sending Lug crashing towards the ground along with it. The moment his 2 feet landed on the ground, Lug shouted as he resisted one of the most dangerous weapons in existence. The weapon of the Monkey King could injure gods, and it was something that all of the gods in the temple were aware of. This was why Lug had to treat it seriously, or else he would suffer terribly. The ground under his feet cracked as he held up his shield to combat the staff that was pinning him to the ground. Lily's mouth opened wide as she looked at the staff that extended thousands of meters long, and nearly 40 meters thick. William roared as he channeled his aura into the staff to crush the annoying god like a bug. Lug gritted his teeth as he endured William's unreasonable attack that broke all the rules of the heavenly domain. However, what he didn't know was that the half-elf's attack wasn't over yet. Quick shot war art, 4th form. William shouted, Grand Bazooka. Issei, Lily and David's eyes widened in shock because they had completely forgotten that William's ability could be channeled through his weapon. The immortal heroes and the gods watching the battle unconsciously shuddered because they, also, just remembered this fact. Everyone who was watching this scene from the heavens knew that they wouldn't want themselves to be at the receiving end of this unreasonable attack of epic proportions. Just as they expected, another world-shaking explosion, that wouldn't lose to Lug's full-powered attack earlier, broke out from the tip of the golden staff. Zhu and Sha, who was seriously injured and lying on the ground, raised their middle fingers in William's direction. The two of them cursed the half-elf for not thinking about their well-being when he fired the gigantic bazooka at point-blank range. Soon, the entire battlefield, including the heavenly gate, was bathed in a fiery blaze that extended up to the heavens, destroying everything in its wake. Chapter 333, A God's Pride. When was the last time I felt pain? The gigantic staff pressed on the golden shield, exerting unbelievable pressure that made the ground under his feet shatter from the impact. When was the last time I was injured? A searing pain spread through his arm as he kept the shield above his body. However, due to the weight that was pressing down on him, his body crouched down a bit to support the golden shield that was preventing him from getting a fatal injury. When was the last time I fought seriously? Blood started to trickle down the side of the man's lips as he endured the attack that had almost brought him down to his knees. When was the last time that I felt alive? While he was thinking these thoughts, a loud shout descended from the heavens. Quick Shot War Art, 4th Form. Grand Bazooka. The man chuckled as he braced himself for the inevitable. This kid sure got me good. A world-shaking explosion made the man's ears bleed because his eardrums had been ruptured by the grand bazooka that had been fired at him at point-blank range. The man gritted his teeth as he used his willpower to envelop his entire body in a golden aura to lessen the injury that he was about to sustain. He knew that he wouldn't be able to escape this attack, so the least he could do was prevent himself from getting completely obliterated by the attack that came from the fusion of a mortal with an immortal. A fiery blaze extended up to the heavens, destroying everything in its wake. Even in his current form, the man felt his skin tearing apart due to the intense heat of the flames. He didn't know how long this pain lasted, because every passing second felt like years. If his ears were still working, he would have heard the cracking sounds coming from the arm that was propping the shield up. Unfortunately, he couldn't hear, and the inevitable had happened. The arm that supported the shield bent in an unnatural angle and it came crashing down on the man's face. His entire body was pinned to the ground as the force of the blast devastated his surroundings. When the attack finally ended, the man opened his eyes. He then pushed the shield, that covered his face, aside with his bloody left arm because he wasn't able to move his other arm. His blurred vision locked on a tiny black speck in the sky, and he knew, more than anything else, who that small and frail visage belonged to. The man's body was hurting all over, but he didn't care. He forcefully propped himself up, but he wasn't able to stand. The reason? His legs had also been broken due to the power of the blast that battered his entire body. The man chuckled internally, as he looked up at the boy that hovered in the sky, while standing on top of a cloud. Even though they were thousands of meters apart, he could see the expression on his face. The boy was sweating buckets and his breathing was ragged. Clearly, the last attack had taken its toll on him. The man looked past the boy and stared at the burning sun behind him. It was currently midnight inside the heavenly domain, but due to his ability, the sun was shining unimpeded in the sky. It pushed away the darkness of the night and illuminated everything in the world. The man's gaze lingered at the sun for a minute before shifting his attention back to the boy that was looking down at him from the heavens. Lug remembered when he was born in the temple of the 10,000 gods. The faith of his believers had poured into his body, filing it with unsurpassed strength. He was born intelligent and wise, for it was what the people had portrayed him to be. He was Lug. He was born a trickster. He was born a craftsman. He was born a judge. He was born a warrior. He was born a king. He was born a god. Asshole, your brood never ceases to cause trouble for me. Lug chuckled internally as he thought of a distant past, where an idiotic, red-haired, man built his statue in a plane that had long ceased to exist. Lug shook his head as he locked this memory deep inside his heart and focused his attention on the boy that carried that man's bloodline in his veins. Do you know what Sun Knights, champions of the sun, and scions of Solaris have in common? Lug asked. Although he was injured, his voice was firm and steady. It didn't sound like the words he spoke came from a defeated person. I don't know, William replied. He continued to gaze down at the man lying on the ground, riddled with injuries and open wounds that blood trickled out of, staining the earth with a crimson hue. As long as the sun shines down from the heavens, they are practically invincible. Lug smiled. As if waiting for that moment, several popping sounds were heard in his broken arm, the one that had held the golden shield. His legs, that were bent at unnatural angles, straightened themselves. All the wounds on his body closed up and recovered completely. Lug stood up from the ground and patted the dust, that had accumulated in his body, off as if he just woken up from his nap. The blood on the ground turned into golden flames until no traces of it were left. If not for the fact that everyone had witnessed what had happened a while ago, they would think that everything they saw was just an illusion. As long as the sun is at its zenith, I am invincible. Lug declared. His statement carried a hint of pride. It was the pride of a god that had been born out of the beliefs of millions of people. A pride that wouldn't lose to a mortal child. A pride that wouldn't lose to an immortal monkey king. A pride that would endure the test of time. Lug raised his hand and a flaming spear appeared in his hand. He then grinned as he looked at the boy whose expression had turned serious. Come, boy, Lug said in a teasing tone. He then pointed the tip of the spear in William's direction as he prepared himself to fight once again. Time for round 2. Lug laughed. He laughed wholeheartedly. Lightning God War Art Final Form, Lug raised his hand and the flaming spear disappeared. It was replaced by the very first spear that William had held in his second lifetime. The spear that was called the Ainsworth family's heirloom. Lightning bolts poured down from the sky and congregated at the tip of the divine spear in Lugga's hands. If William thought that the time when he used the skill Thunder God's wrath was already heaven-defying, then the scale of Lugga's attack far surpassed everything that he could think of. Make the world tremble in your presence, Lugg stated. Annihilate all opposition, Assel. Chapter 334, Returning to the Temple of the Gods. William had a very bad feeling as all of his senses screamed at him that death was fast approaching. He firmly gripped the golden rod in his hand as he gritted his teeth. Since his opponent had now become serious, it was time for him to get serious as well. Quick shot war art. Fusion form. William shouted internally as he pointed the tip of his spear. Blitzer railgun. Make the world tremble in your presence, Lugg roared. Annihilate all opposition, Assel. The two powerful attacks activated at the same time. William's attack traveled at the speed of sound. The other, at the speed of lightning. The half-elf was bathed in heavenly lightning and pain racked his body. However, he endured. He dodged Lugga's attack by a hair's breadth, but it was enough to seriously injure him. If his skill activation had been delayed by half a second, the god's attack would have hit him without a doubt. The golden rod's body was strong. After all, it was a weapon that belonged to one of the greatest immortal heroes of all time. Even against the attack of a god, it was a weapon that wouldn't be destroyed that easily. 8 seconds. It took 8 seconds before Ryu Jingbang passed through the heavenly gate. William's vision blacked out right after he managed to escape with his life. Lugg stared at the heavenly gate with a smile as he raised his hand. Athabar. Assel, the lightning spear, and one of the 4 jewels of the Tuatha returned to his hand. You're just as slippery as your ancestor. Lugg grinned evilly. Isn't that right, Assel? The spear in Lugga's hand remained silent. The god snorted and casually threw the spear towards the sky, where it disappeared. He then returned to the temple to rest. Even though it had only lasted for a brief moment, he still enjoyed the short battle he had with William after staying in the temple for thousands of years. William groggily opened his eyes. He then tried to move his body and immediately regretted it. Tendrils of electricity snaked around him, and the smell of burnt flesh reached his nose. It was also at this moment when a wave of burning pain washed over his body. The half-elf gritted his teeth as he summoned a pink lollipop into his hand. He tore the wrapper off using his teeth before placing it inside his mouth. William sighed in relief as he tasted the familiar, cherry-flavored, sweetness spreading across his taste buds. The numbness and semi-paralysis he was feeling wore off after eating the pink lollipop infused by the divinity of a goddess. The next thing he did was summon a red lollipop. He didn't eat it right away. Instead he held it firmly in his hand as he increased the effects of the lollipop. Just like the white lollipop, William could compress and stack the effects of the red lollipop, making it a very powerful healing candy. After exhausting half of the red lollipop's daily quota, William placed it inside his mouth to eat. Immediately, he could feel his injuries getting better. Although they were far from a complete recovery, it was still better than nothing. I almost died back there, William thought as he chewed on the lollipop inside his mouth. The crunching noises of the candy being grounded by his teeth sounded non-stop. Suddenly, a light cough was heard in the distance and a pair of feet walked towards him. Child, I'd appreciate it if you didn't litter here in the entrance of the temple, an old man with a long white beard said in annoyance. Do you want me to make you pay with god points? William turned his head to the side and saw the familiar old man that had once opened the gate to allow William, and those that came with him, to enter the temple of the 10,000 gods. Gramps, why am I here? William asked. He thought that after he entered the heavenly gate, he would return to his world where his loved ones were waiting for him. You're here because you entered the heavenly gate, the old gatekeeper said with a hint of approval and admiration. This is the second time I've seen someone manage to clear the heavenly trial. Not bad, young man. Not bad. William groaned as he covered his face with a hand. He still didn't understand why he ended up in the entrance of the temple, but since that was the case, he just had to meet with Issei, Lily, and David to know what was going on. A few minutes passed before William managed to stand on his own 2 feet. He summoned the golden staff that belonged to the Monkey King, and it flew to him as if it was originally his. William gritted his teeth as he dragged his injured body towards the gate with the aid of the golden staff. The old gatekeeper walked beside him, matching his pace. It was his way of showing respect to the second person that had cleared the trial and fought against the celestial army within the heavenly domain. Naturally, he remembered who William was. This was why he was both surprised and curious about how the boy managed to return to the temple a second time. Usually, souls that were still living were banned from entering the temple. Only the souls of the dead were allowed to enter the gates that he had guarded since time immemorial. However, since William cleared the trial, he would be given special rights to enter the temple for a second time even though he was still technically alive. Well then, I welcome you once again to the temple of the 10,000 gods, the old man said as he opened the gate to allow William to pass through. May this be the last instance you visit this temple during your lifetime. Of course, I will be here to welcome you once again when the fates decree for you to return to the cycle of reincarnation. William smiled bitterly as he nodded his head. Indeed. The next time he would enter this temple again would be on the day of his death. The images of his family, friends, and acquaintances flashed before his eyes. It was then when he remembered that there were still some things that he still needed to do. His lovers, Wendy, EST, and Ian were waiting for his return. He also hadn't met the goddess Astrid to ask her about the method that would remove the curse from EST's, Ian's, and Isaac's bodies. Since EST and Ian were his lovers, it was his responsibility to return them to their true forms. There was also the fact that he still hadn't seen his patron god, Gavin. Issei, Lily, and David had casually mentioned that Gavin had received a backlash when he forced himself to descend to William's world. William knew that he still had many things to do. Dying so young was not one of them. If possible, William didn't want to die too soon. He still had promises to keep. Promises he was determined to keep. Chapter 335, What I Want, is you. You and your men are incompetent fools. Prince Lionel slammed his fist on the table as he glared at Callum. You promised me that I would have her. But what did you do? You let her escape. Callum narrowed his eyes, but he didn't say anything to the crown prince who was looking at him with bloodshot eyes. It was indeed his mistake for underestimating the third princess of Frisia, who was not only beautiful, but also well versed in reading the books on the arts of war. What he didn't know was that Princess Sidney was also a clever strategist behind closed doors. She would order her pets to do missions for her, and some of these missions included the assassinations of corrupt officials in her kingdom. Well, the one giving the orders was Morgana, but since they shared the same body, everyone who was in the know about her dual personalities still credited these achievements to Princess Sidney, who only dreamed of finding her one true love. Our agents are already looking for her trail, Callum reported. The journey to Frisia will take at least a week, and we have already laid ambushes to intercept her along the way. Prince Lionel was so mad that he wanted to laugh out loud when he heard Callum's reply. Do you honestly believe that Princess Sidney is not aware of the ambushes that you have laid out for her? Prince Lionel questioned. Do you think of her as a fool? The lady I love is not a small fry that you can capture using tricks for little kids. Prince Lionel pounded the table once again to vent out his frustrations. Since he dreamed of making Princess Sidney his wife, he did his best to investigate everything about her. The things she liked to eat, her hobbies, and anything that would make her happy. He studied it for many years in order to increase his chances of closing the distance between the two of them. However, when the princess had arrived in the capital, all the preparations he had made didn't work. It was as if he was talking to a completely different person. Truth be told, Princess Sidney didn't like to deal with Prince Lionel. This was why, most of the time, when the crown prince and the princess were alone, it would always be Morgana talking to the crown prince. Princess Sidney would only talk to him when they were in the presence of others, which made all of Lionel's attempts futile. The crown prince also realized that ever since the party where the princess had danced with William, Princess Sidney would always ask him things about the half-elf. This made the crown prince very jealous to the point that he ordered his men to assassinate the unconscious half-elf. But, none of the men he ordered to do this task had returned to his side. That was when Prince Lionel realized that there was someone strong protecting the boy. Since that was the case, he stopped giving out orders in order to keep his men from dying. Fortunately, William had fallen into a coma after the demon invasion, in the academy. Because of this, the princess didn't have the opportunity to meet with him before the war started. This was the only consolation Prince Lionel had after his failed attempts to get rid of the red-headed boy. If he only knew that there was an overprotective goat and parrot monkey by William's side, he would certainly not think to send assassins to kill him. Find her no matter what. Lionel ordered. We had a deal and it's your turn to keep your end of the bargain. Callum covered his head with a hood because he was afraid that he would slap the prince if he looked directly at his face. Fine. I will personally go and look for your princess. But, remember this. We are not your minions whom you can order around however you like. Don't push your luck, Crown Prince. Callum left the room leaving a frustrated Prince Lionel behind. Soon, the sound of things breaking could be heard inside the room. The Crown Prince vented his anger until he could no longer break anything. He vowed that the next time he saw Princess Sidney, he would pin her down, and show no mercy. Prince Lionel always got what he wanted. However, he also understood that he had to rely on the organization to make him the emperor of the southern continent. No matter where you run, no matter where you hide, I will find you, Prince Lionel vowed. When that day comes, I will make sure that you will no longer be able to run away. Princess Sidney, I will make you regret running away from this prince. Princess, are you sure about this? Priscilla asked as she followed behind Princess Sidney. What if the queen wasn't affected by that continental spell that they invoked? Princess Sidney walked as she removed the rings in her fingers one by one. It doesn't matter if the queen is active or not. What is important is that she's defenseless right now. The two young ladies walked into a wide tunnel, hundreds of meters below the ground. Princess Sidney and Morgana knew that they would have a hard time escaping their pursuers. The two of them didn't excel in combat, so fighting wasn't an option. This was why Princess Sidney took Priscilla with her when she escaped from Raven Lord Citadel. The princess knew that the organization was also present in Frisia, so she decided to make a detour. Morgana suggested that they go to Anthialm where the queen ant, that supplied the Anisesha dynasty with unlimited warrior ants, was located. Soon, the two arrived in a very spacious cavern littered with countless eggs. At the center was a giant beast, that was also the guardian beast of the Anisesha dynasty. It was none other than the myriad beast known as the crowned nightmare queen ant. The queen ant had the lower body of an ant, and the upper body of a beautiful woman. She had already sensed Princess Sidney's approach and raised her head in defiance. Currently, she was in a weakened state because the continental spell had also affected her, even though she was deep underground. Don't come any closer, the ant queen shrieked because her instincts were telling her that Princess Sidney was a very dangerous being. What do you want? Princess Sidney ignored the ant queen's pitiful struggles as she removed the last accessory from her hand. What I want, is you, Princess Sidney said as she removed the veil that covered her face. The queen ant's expression immediately softened as her gaze locked on Sidney's beautiful face. Seeing that her plan had worked, Sidonie moved closer to the Queen Ant. She just needed to do one last thing in order to seal the Queen's fate. Using her hairpin, Princess Sidonie pricked her fingertip until a drop of blood was formed. She then wrote a magic circle in the air using her blood as a medium. Soon, a magic contract of Master and Beast hovered in front of her. The Queen Ant lowered her massive body in order to allow Princess Sidonie to embed the magic circle into her forehead. The Queen Ant offered no resistance and allowed the contract to merge with her body. Half a minute later, Princess Sidonie felt a strong connection with the Myriad Beast, which proved that she had succeeded in making the Myriad Ant Queen her beast companion. Since she was young, Princess Sidonie had always wanted to make a Myriad Beast her beast companion. Although the Queen Ant had only average fighting skills, it was capable of producing an army that numbered in the millions. With this, Princess Sidonie wouldn't have to worry about not having enough warriors to fight for her. The only thing she needed to do now was to wait a few days for the ant eggs to hatch. These eggs had been unaffected by the spell because they didn't quite meet the requirements that had crippled the entire southern continent. Sidonie was sure that the moment they hatched, only a handful of individuals in the current southern continent would be her match. Chapter 336, Don't cause too much of a ruckus in hell. When William entered the Temple of the 10,000 Gods, he saw a good number of candidates that were wandering around the countless stalls within the area that William had labeled as the bazaar. He wasn't able to stop the smile that formed on his face, as the sounds of cheesy pickup lines reached his ears. It reminded him of the days when he first entered the temple and had met Gavin, Lily, Issei, and David. William walked very slowly as he used the golden staff to support his body. Although Lily's candy had helped him recover, the damages he sustained from Luga's overwhelming attack were still present in his body. Clearly, it would take more than a few lollipops to completely recover from the attack of a god. He was about to look for Issei, Lily, and David when a familiar figure blocked his path. Well, look at who we have here, the apple goddess, Lulu, said as she crossed her arms over her chest. What happened to you, little Will? You look like you've fought against an entire army. The gods in the nearby stalls chuckled at Lulu's teasing words. Naturally, they had also watched William's battle inside the Heavenly Gate and eyed him with renewed interest. For them, watching a god personally fight against a candidate was pure entertainment. Hello, Lulu, William greeted with a smile. Have you been well? Lulu grinned as she patted William's shoulder, which immediately made the half-elf grimace in pain. Well enough, Lulu chuckled. Here, have an apple. Don't worry, this one is free of charge. Lulu handed a golden apple to William and urged him to eat it. For some reason, the golden apple reminded him of the apple that he was given in Asgard by the adult Wendy in his dreams. William only hesitated for a brief moment before taking a bite on the apple. Soon, a wave of warm and soothing energy traveled across his body. It felt so comfortable that he wasn't able to prevent a sigh of pleasure from escaping his lips. After taking the first bite, William ate the apple with gusto until nothing was left. The pain and exhaustion he felt disappeared like a fleeting breeze, and he could feel his strength returning to his body. Thank you, Lulu, William said, sincerely. You're welcome, Lulu replied as she patted William's shoulder. The next time you reincarnate, make sure to choose me as your patron god. I can at least guarantee that no one will be able to kill you easily, not even a god. Lulu winked at William before returning to her stall. For some reason, William believed that the words of the apple goddess weren't empty boasts. With such a miraculous apple that could instantly heal any injuries, her followers would indeed be very hard to kill. Big brother. Before William could even react, a certain lowly goddess jumped onto his chest like a cannonball, sending him skidding a few meters across the floor. In the end, William fell down on his back while holding the mischievous Lily in his arms. Lily, I just recovered, William said before patting the Lily's head, who was clinging to him like a leech. Can you take it easy on me? Ehe. Lily giggled. William sighed because Lily could be a handful at times. He then raised his head to see Issei and David walking towards his direction. Both of them were smiling and Issei even gave William a playful wink when he neared the boy. Congratulations on completing the heavenly trial, Issei said with a smile. You really caused quite the commotion. The Jade Emperor now has a headache about how to deal with the aftermath. David chuckled as he continued Issei's explanation. Over 1 million celestial knights are out of commission because of you. The heavenly domain will have to be closed for repairs. Also, all of the defenders are now undergoing hell training as punishment because they failed to stop you from entering the heavenly gate. Lily pulled William up from the ground and patted his clothes for him. Don't worry, big brother. After 10 years, the heavenly domain will reopen. I sure pity the next candidate who undertakes the trial. They will not stand a chance because the celestial army will not allow themselves to be defeated for a third time. They will lose half of their salary if this incident happens again. William felt sweat forming on his forehead after hearing Lily's words. He felt like he was the cause of all these problems and wondered if the Jade Emperor would ask him to pay for the damages that he had caused after Sun Wukong descended on the battlefield. The three gods could read William's thoughts and snickered internally. They were the true culprits behind William's trial, so naturally, the blame should be on their shoulders. The three cheapskates were more than happy to push all the blame on William when the Jade Emperor came to ask for compensation. Now that you have cleared the trial, and registered your immortal guardian, it is now time for you to return to your world, David said. Do you want to return now? Or do you still have unfinished business that you have to settle here? I still have some unfinished business, William nodded. Sir David, do you know the goddess Astrid? Astrid. A playful smile appeared on David's face. Of course I know her. Do you want to talk to her about something? Yes. William explained the curse that was placed on Ian and Isaac, to the three gods that supported him. Naturally, they were aware of this backstory because Astrid had come clean when William and EST were fighting together at the Trial of Courage. Also, I want to see Gavin as well, William said. I'm also worried about his condition. The three gods nodded simultaneously. William was one of the two followers of Gavin. It was perfectly understandable for the boy to want to see him. Although Issei, Lily and David had their reservations in allowing the two to meet, they still decided to allow William to see his patron god. Let's go visit Astrid first, Issei suggested. He then patted William's shoulder before whispering in his ears. Astrid is a stubborn goddess. She will try to intimidate you, but do not falter. After all, you are doing this for the sake of your lovers, right? William nodded his head seriously. Yes. I need to find a way to return them to their original bodies. Lily, who was standing beside William, grabbed his arm and waved it from side to side. Don't worry, big brother, if she doesn't agree, we can always blackmail her to cooperate with you. William scratched his head as he looked at the adorable Lily in front of him. The more he interacted with Lily, the more he thought that she was a battle goddess in disguise. Even so, he pushed these thoughts aside because he needed to focus his attention on the goddess that held the fate of EST and Ian in her hands. Astrid was seated in her garden and drinking tea with her twin brother, Aemon. Aemon was one of the Ars Goetia that presided over Hell and the supreme commander of the 40 legions that rampaged among the higher planes that the gods ruled. Ironically, he was also one of the three gods whom the Creator Empire worshipped. Unlike his prideful and stubborn twin sister, Aemon was charming, confident and a well-known rule breaker. There were even times when Astrid had to personally drag him back to the temple in order to prevent him from getting out of line. Even so, the twins got along really well. The only problem was that their personalities were the complete opposite of each other. Looks like an interesting brat is planning to demand something from you, sister dear, Aemon teased. Astrid placed her teacup down on the table and gave her twin a sidelong glance. He's just a brat, you don't need to mind him too much. Aemon smirked before standing up from his seat. Well then, I'll be returning to my palace. See you later, Astrid. Stay away from trouble, Aemon. Astrid warned. Don't cause too much of a ruckus in hell. Aemon chuckled. He then winked at his twin sister before disappearing from the garden. Astrid looked at the teacup on the table with a calm expression. She already knew that William would look for when he appeared in the temple, so she had prepared a quest beforehand. It was not like she was against lifting the curse on her devout followers. In fact, she even wanted to do it as well. However, it wasn't as simple as that. In order to keep her promise to the Hellan kingdom, she needed to ask for the favor of another god. And that god had already escaped back to Hell in order to prevent his twin sister from introducing him to William. That's right. The god that agreed to help Astrid tweak the continental spell, that descended on the southern continent, was none other than Aemon. In order to break the curse, William must travel to the central continent and find a way to make the Marquis of Hell agree to lift the curse on his lovers and friend. However, knowing her twin brother's personality, Astrid knew that William would be sent on a wild goose chase. She just hoped that at the end of that journey, her devout followers would once again recover the things that they had lost. The goddess waved her hand as the gates of the garden opened wide. William walked with steady steps, accompanied by three of the gods who supported him from the heavens. Let's see how far you can go, boy. The corner of Astrid's lips curled up because she could already see the hardships that William would face as he tried to negotiate with Aemon. Show me that you are worthy of my devout followers' love. If you can't even do this much then you don't deserve EST's and Ian's affections. Although Astrid was grateful for William's help, that didn't mean that she approved of him. She decided to use this test to judge the half-elf's character. Only after he passed her twin brother's test then and only then would she recognize him as a man worthy of her followers' love. Chapter 337, The Undying Lands. In a hidden valley found in the southern part of the Hellan kingdom. A man wearing a red robe stared at a monument that had been covered by moss. The man casually removed the mask he was wearing, for there was no longer any need to hide his real identity. He had placed an enchantment on his face mask that distorted his facial features to prevent others from recognizing him. The man, with short, dark brown hair and green eyes, looked at the monument with a smile. His hand rose up to casually stroke the pointed tip of his ear as if trying to confirm that it was there. Unlike the pointed ears of an elf, the man's ears were more human-like. However, it wouldn't change the fact that his elven ancestry had ensured that he would forever be an outcast among the full-blooded elves. That's right, he was a half-elf that was shunned from the Silver Moon continent because of his impure bloodline. His name was Connor Garnell Ross. One of the leaders of the organization that went by the name Dias. Connor was the one assigned by the Supreme Pontifex to take command of the entire southern continent. Due to having no competition, he used the funds of the organization to pursue his own goals, while paying lip service to their Supreme Pontifex, who was in charge of the main branch of Dias in the central continent. Every member of the organization had their own goals when they joined. However, they all had one thing in common, they wanted the world to descend into chaos and strife. For they were people who had been cast away by society and suffered untold hardships from their clans. Celine was once one of them. Due to her ill-gotten fate, she wanted to take revenge on those that had made her life miserable. More than anything else, she wanted to make the High Council of the Elves pay for the sufferings that she had undergone during the early years of her life. This was why she reached out to the organization, and they in turn, accepted her into their ranks. However, after meeting William, Celine had mellowed out a bit. Although she still hadn't forgotten those who wronged her, she was not in a hurry to seek her revenge. For her, the most important thing was to teach her only disciple everything she knew about dark magic. That way, when the elven prophecy was fulfilled, she could freely join the Prince of Darkness and turn the Silver Moon continent upside down. Frankly, Celine didn't believe that William was the one in the prophecy. More like, she didn't want William to become the person who would cover the world in eternal darkness. She would rather have someone else take that role instead of the narcissistic half-elf that had suffered cruelty at her hands. Just like Celine, Connor hated the Silver Moon continent as well. Perhaps, he hated it more than she did. Why? Because he was a half-elf. A race that the proud elves deemed as filthy. Connor closed his eyes to push away the unwanted memories that had resurfaced inside his mind. 2 minutes later, he had regained his calm and once again looked at the monument that had been hidden inside an artificial cave in the valley, located in the southern regions of the Hellan Kingdom. All of you stand back, Connor ordered the loyal supporters that had followed him for many years. I will open the gate to the Undying Lands. Over a dozen black-robed men stepped a few meters away from where Connor stood. They knew that their leader had been looking for the key that would unravel the secrets of the southern continent. Connor took out an ornate box from his pocket and opened it. The Oathkeeper key glowed and shot a beam of light towards the monument. A few seconds later, the monument started to change its shape until it took the form of a teleportation gate. Connor made a gesture and one of his subordinates entered the portal. As the leader of the organization, he was not allowed to take chances. This was why he decided to use his trusted confidant as a scout to check the other side of the gate. 10 minutes later, his subordinate returned and made a report. "Yes, sir, it is unbelievable," the black-robed man stuttered. His face was wild with excitement and Connor could tell that they had hit the jackpot. The domain is filled with rare resources that can only be found in Class S domains and higher. Also, there is a floating island in the sky. I tried to use my mount, but the domain seems to have a restriction that prevents any forms of flight. Connor nodded. He did his best to hide the excitement on his face because he had finally found the Undying Lands. The domain where the first ruler of the Hellan Kingdom had been enshrined. This was also the hidden domain that was rumored to hold the secret of immortality. "Good," Connor replied. "Everyone, follow me." "Yes, sir." When Connor and his men entered the domain, they were immediately greeted by lush greenery. Although they didn't sense any living beasts within the domain, they could tell that it was very much alive. Even after thousands of years this place had thrived without intervention from the outside world, Connor mused as he observed the surroundings. He could feel the dense magic and spiritual power in the air. This was the sign that many rare herbs, minerals, metals, and other rare treasures resided within the domain. However, the most eye-catching landmark of the Undying Lands was the floating island in the sky. Connor deemed that it was at least a mile long from where he stood. He was very curious about what secrets the island held, so he immediately activated the flying artifact in his possession. The artifact came to life, and Connor could feel that it was working properly. However, his feet were still firmly planted on the ground. Clearly, what his subordinate said about the flying restriction was true. Although he was disappointed, Connor also felt happy because no one would also be able to sneak onto the island. There must be a hidden passage somewhere, Connor thought as he scanned his surroundings. I need to find it as soon as possible. Before they come knocking on my door. Connor knew that his superiors had become suspicious of his recent actions in the southern continent, so he decided to use the continental spell as a distraction to prevent them from finding out his real intentions. He was also aware that the Creator Empire and the elves had arrived and were currently in the process of conquering the human kingdoms that had no power to resist their invasion. That's right, Connor didn't care about the southern continent. He also didn't care about the promise he made with Lionel. The Crown Prince was just a means to acquire the Oathkeeper key. Although he wouldn't mind letting the traitorous prince keep his rule in the Hellan kingdoms, he would not lift a finger to help him conquer the lands that the Creatorian Empire and Elven forces had captured. As a member of the organization, he still couldn't defy the Supreme Pontifex. The only time he would be able to do so was when he, himself, had discovered the secrets of immortality. Then and only then would he be able to break free from the chains that bound him and enact his vengeance on the elves who had killed his family. "Wash your necks, patriarchs of the Saleh, Nasir, Reese, and Iroan clans," Connor said softly as he stared at the floating island in the sky. "I will personally come to kill each and every one of you. But before that, I will kill all your prodigies first. Although he was certain that the head of the organization that was assigned to the Silver Moon continent was behind the movement of the elves, he wouldn't let that stop him from getting his vengeance. But before that, he would focus his attention on gathering the resources inside the domain and finding a way to reach the floating island, which he assumed held the secrets that he was looking for. Chapter 338, Invaders of the Southern Continent. A few days after they reached the shores of the southern continent, the elves immediately headed to the Zealand dynasty to start their first conquest on human lands. Just as they expected, everyone above the age of 20 had turned into crystal statues. One could even say that taking over the kingdom was just like stealing candy from a baby. There were a few that tried to resist, but they were unable to match the strength of the elven prodigies. "Weak. So weak," one of the elven prodigies exclaimed after defeating a 19-year-old boy who tried to protect the rest of the surviving children that were gathered in the town hall. Several other teenagers laid on the ground injured, while others were unconscious. The other elven prodigies looked at the fallen humans with disdain. They didn't expect much resistance from the survivors, but the young warriors of the Zealand dynasty were simply too weak. "Why don't we just kill them?" a handsome elf with green hair proposed as he stepped on the head of one of the fallen warriors. "I'm sure that killing them would teach the others that they shouldn't oppose our rule, right?" Cheers of agreement sounded from the elves, which made the handsome elf grin wickedly. "That's enough. A cold and commanding voice ordered. The handsome green-haired elf was about to protest, but immediately held back his complaint when he saw the owner of the voice that ordered him to stop. I was just joking, princess. The green-haired elf stepped back and gave a respectful bow. A beautiful elf with long, honey blonde hair, and blue eyes nodded her head in understanding. She was the representative of the king who was given the duty of supervisor for this expedition. Although the command of the entire mission lay in Elander's hands, no elf that was born in the Silver Moon continent would defy the orders of the royal princess. This was true even though she only had the rank of supervisor. Even Elador had to be respectful of her wishes, for she was Eowyn, the fourth princess of the Starlight Forest, and High Princess of the Silver Moon continent. Although humans have enslaved our race for thousands of years, that doesn't mean that we have to lower ourselves to their level, Princess Eowyn said. We are elves. Our race is superior to theirs. There's no reason for us to act as barbarians. The green-haired elf smiled and nodded his head in agreement. It is as you say, princess. I'm sorry, my emotions got the best of me. Understandable. Please, make sure that you don't repeat these actions again in the future. Understood, your highness. The green-haired elf backed down completely. None of the other elves said anything. They just glanced at their commander, Elador, waiting for his orders. Gather the warriors and lock them up in the prisons, Elador ordered. As for the human children that can't fight, leave them be. They are of no threat to us. Elador smiled as he glanced at the princess who was standing a few meters away. Since her royal highness is merciful, then we will also show mercy. This is the difference between our race and the barbarians. We shouldn't lower ourselves to their level. Yes. The young elven prodigies didn't dare say anything in front of the princess, but in their hearts they wanted to humiliate the humans and make them pay for the long years of slavery that their race had suffered in their hands. Although they agreed on the surface, that didn't mean that they wouldn't do anything when the attention of the elven princess laid elsewhere. They were very keen in torturing and enslaving the humans that had treated the elven race as their playthings. After receiving Elander's orders, the elven warriors dragged the fallen teenagers away and tied them up to prevent them from causing trouble. Their takeover of the capital of the Zealand dynasty went very smoothly. However, they were not able to capture the survivors of the royal family. One could even say that the members of the royal family were no longer in the capital when they arrived. It was as if they were expecting their arrival. It was at that moment when over 100 black-robed men appeared on the castle walls with weapons at the ready. Who are you and what are you doing in human lands? One of the black-robed men asked. Elador sneered and unsheathed his blade. My name is Elador, the commander of the elven forces that will take over this kingdom. Men, kill these mongrels. Several of the elves immediately summoned their bows and began shooting. Those who were proficient with magic immediately cast spells in order to keep any of the black-robed men alive. The elders that had come with them in this undertaking had already warned them that the southern continent had fallen under the control of a notorious organization. They added that if they were to meet them, they should do their best to exterminate all of them if possible. The leader of the black-robed men immediately ordered a hasty retreat as he cast protective spells in order to protect him from the elven arrows and spells that were falling upon them like rain. As one of Connor's commanding officers, it was his duty to take complete control of the Zealand dynasty. Even so, the difference in numbers was enough to tell him that fighting the elves wouldn't change anything. Retreat, the black-robed man ordered as the members of the organization did their best to escape with their lives. Unfortunately, not all of them were lucky and died under the hands of the elven prodigies who ran after them as if they were hunting wild boars in the forest. The black-robed men had already felt the presence of blade masters and archmages among the elven army. It would be pure folly to stay and die a dog's death, so he decided to use a teleport scroll in order to escape with his life. He had only one goal in his mind, and that was to report the current state of affairs to his leader, who was currently in the Hellan kingdom. Elador watched in disdain as the members of the organization were massacred left and right. He didn't even bother to order the blade masters, who accompanied him, to take part in the slaughter. For him, having the young elves take the blood of the members of the organization was a good warm-up for their conquest in the human lands. Your Highness, please, accompany me to the castle, Elador said with a confident smile. Although the barbarians are crude, their palace is the only fitting place for you to rest. Allow me to escort you there, Princess Eowyn. He didn't even bat an eye on the blood-curdling screams that reverberated in the air, as he invited the princess to tour the human castle like they were having a stroll in the forest. Princess Eowyn nodded. Thank you, Commander, for your offer. Please, allow me to inconvenience you for the time being. Serving you will not inconvenience me, Your Highness. Instead, it will be my pleasure to accompany you. Thank you, Commander. It only took half a day before all the survivors of the dynasty were gathered. The elven forces made sure that all able-bodied teenagers were imprisoned. Elador picked many beautiful ladies out from among the teenagers because he planned to turn them into slaves. Naturally, some of the elven girls also picked a few handsome men to become their manservants during their stay as well. Yes, they had brought slave collars made in the Silver Moon continent as per order of their patriarchs. They deemed that it was only natural to make the humans pay for the years of enslavement that the elves had suffered under their hands. Elander's plan was to turn these slaves into guides that would tell them more about the extent of the territories that fell under the Zealand dynasty's rule. Naturally, Elador and his officers also planned to make these beautiful slaves their playthings. The elven commander had approved of it, and Princess Eowyn had decided to turn a blind eye to his actions. For her, turning the humans into slaves was much better than outright killing them. This was the unwritten compromise that Elador and her had agreed upon. As a supervisor, she mustn't interfere with how Elador did things. She was only there as a spectator. Preventing unnecessary killings was the only thing she could do for the original citizens of the Zealand dynasty. Still, the royal family has no backbone, Elador said softly as he looked at the castle. At the first sign of trouble, they immediately turned tail and ran. Well, it's not like there would have been any difference had they stayed. The commanding officers beside him nodded their heads in agreement. They were certain that, aside from the Kretarian army, everyone that survived the continental spell was completely under their mercy. What do you mean she's missing? Jason asked the black-robed man under his feet. If you don't tell me what I want to know, I'll kill all of you. After the Kretarian army landed on the shores of the kingdom of Frisia, they immediately seized its capital. However, unlike the elves who held the humans in contempt, the Kretarian army didn't hurt the citizens, and only focused on the black-robed men that had taken over the palace. I swear I'm telling the truth, the black-robed man pleaded. Princess Sidonie escaped from the Hellan kingdom and her whereabouts are unknown. We don't know where she is. Please, I told you everything I know. I beg you, let me go. Jason sneered as he raised the sword in his hand and cut off the man's head in one fluid stroke of his blade. Useless people don't deserve to live, Jason stated. He then turned his eyes to the rest of the black-robed men who were lined up and kneeling in front of him. I'll ask again, where is my cousin? Jason inquired with an evil grin. You don't want to suffer the same fate as this useless man, right? The black-robed men that had been detained by the Kretarian army shuddered. They really don't know where Princess Sidonie was. If they knew, they would not hesitate to immediately tell the bloodthirsty prince, who didn't bat an eye when killing people, the whereabouts of the princess. Of course, Jason knew that they really didn't know the answer to his question. What he was doing was purely for entertainment. He had made it a hobby to make his victims beg for forgiveness before he ended their miserable lives. Chapter 339, Gavin's True Form. William sighed after leaving the garden of the goddess Astrid. He thought that he would be able to come to an agreement with her, but the latter was firm and wouldn't yield to any of William's proposals. Aemon, William thought as he followed behind Lily, Issei, and David. Just what kind of god is he? Astrid had told him that if he wanted to lift the curse that was placed on Ian and Isaac, he must meet with her twin brother, Aemon, in the Kreter Empire, which was located in the central continent. Although William had planned to go to the central continent, it was only for his battle with Rebecca. Now, he had no choice but to go there earlier than planned in order to free his lovers from the curse that bound them. Lily, just what kind of god is Aemon? William inquired. Currently, Lily was walking beside him and matching his pace. The lowly goddess smirked as she pondered how to answer William's question. Many consider Aemon to be one of the most notorious troublemakers to be born in the temple, Lily answered. He is part of the Hell faction that opposes the Heaven faction. Ah, before I forget, Astrid is one of the gods that belongs to the Heaven faction. Sounds complicated. Very complicated indeed. However, what you should worry about is his unpredictability. Lily grinned as she glanced at William. Simply put, Aemon hates losing. However, when you catch him in a good mood, he can be a very amiable character. So, pray that you meet him when he is in a great mood. William nodded and then asked the question that really mattered, what if I meet him when he's in a bad mood? What then? Big brother, don't jinx it. Lily shook her head helplessly. If you happen to be really unlucky and met him when he's in a foul mood, be prepared to be given a quest that is near impossible to complete. Like I said earlier, Aemon hates losing. Since he doesn't want to lose, he will do his best to prevent you from winning. What a troublesome god. Well, he is a sour loser. Issei and David chuckled at the same time because they were also acquaintances of Aemon. Being part of the neutral faction, the three gods enjoyed mingling with the different factions, and oftentimes befriending them. The neutral faction also served as intermediaries to help resolve conflicts between the opposing factions. In fact, Lily and Aemon were close friends. The reason why Lily didn't mention this to William was because she didn't want her close friend, Aemon, to give the boy any kind of special treatment. The lowly goddess was a firm believer that those who were able to endure hardships were stronger than people who had it easy in life. She didn't want William to take shortcuts in order to help his lovers undo the curse that was placed on their bodies. Right now, they were on their way to visit Gavin's hut on the outskirts of the temple. William was worried about him and the three reluctantly agreed to his request to visit their fallen comrade. This is as far as we go, Issei said as he pointed at a small hut in the distance. Gavin is still recuperating, so don't be shocked by what you are going to see. William nodded his head as he walked towards the hut in the distance. The moment he entered the hut, the three gods gave each other a knowing glance. They were quite curious about how the red-headed boy would react after seeing the true form of the god he had chosen as his patron. So you're finally here. A crisp and sharp voice greeted him as soon as he entered. William blinked once then twice as he stared at the man in front of him. A man wearing black padded armor, with sharp and hawkish features, sat in the center of the hut. He then pointed at the spot in front of him and ordered William to sit. The red-headed boy subconsciously obeyed the command because of the man's intimidating aura. It's good to see that you are doing well, despite your spiritual world getting destroyed, the man said after giving William a hard long look. However, you can't fight for more than an hour in your state. Make sure to finish all battles before the time limit. Understood. Why yes, William stuttered. The god in front of him was like an unsheathed blade that was radiating a certain sharpness that demanded absolute obedience. Have you mastered the use of Issei's and Lily's divinities? Gavin asked. Have you upgraded your shepherd job class to the next stage? Yes, William answered. This time his answer was firm. He then stared straight at the god in front of him and voiced his thoughts out loud. Gavin. MMM. William couldn't believe that the chubby patron god he had met in the temple was the same man who was sitting in front of him. The difference between the two was like heaven and hell. I know what you are thinking, but this is my original form, Gavin commented. Of course, the one you met is also me. Right now, that version of me is currently injured and has to recuperate. A short silence descended inside the hut before William asked another question. How long will it take him, you to recover? William inquired. Gavin answered without batting an eye, a year. During that time, I will be unable to do anything to help you in your world. So, make sure not to get yourself killed. Unless you want to be reincarnated as a monkey in your next life. Do you want to? Of course not. Then don't die. Simple, right? William nodded his head repeatedly. He had no intention of dying anytime soon, so he affirmed Gavin's words. Gavin glared at him, but the half-elf only gave his patron god a sheepish smile. In the end, the god of all trades sighed and pressed one of his fingertips against William's forehead. In order to keep what happened last time from happening again, I will unlock a special feature in your system to allow you to merge 5 job classes into one, Gavin said with a serious expression. Know that you can only do this once. So make sure to only choose the best job classes to merge together. William felt a divine power enter his soul. However, this feeling didn't last long. He understood that Gavin had made a great compromise to ensure his safety and he was very thankful for it. Merging 10 job classes was a high hurdle in his current state. Being able to merge 5 of them would allow him some leeway and to obtain a job class that would definitely be a level stronger than the prestige classes he currently had. After passing his power to the boy, Gavin took a deep breath and closed his eyes. Go, Gavin ordered. I'll see you in a year. William stood up and bowed his head to show his respect to the god that had sacrificed a lot for him. Thank you, Gavin. Do not worry about me. I'll do my best to unlock the full power of the jack of all trades in the future. Gavin opened his eyes momentarily before he closed them again. I believe you. Now, go. William looked at his patron god one last time before leaving the hut. A few minutes after he left, Gavin vomited a mouthful of blood before he collapsed on the floor of his hut. He was still injured and he had transferred more of his divinity to William in order to bestow a new ability upon him. This took a toll on his already weakened body. Because of this, he would have to seal himself within his hut for 3 years in order to have a complete recovery. He lied to William because he knew that the boy would worry about him if he told him the truth. Gavin knew that Issei, Lily, and David would look after William, so he was able to impart his power to the boy without worries. Stay safe, William, Gavin muttered before he lost consciousness. The god of all trades hoped that the next time he opened his eyes, his devout follower would be able to accomplish the things he had set out to do. He believed that a day would come when William would be able to keep his promise. His promise to unlock the full power of the jack of all trades and let his name be known far and wide within the world of Hestia. Chapter 340, Blame the fact that your surname is Ainsworth. The students and the young knights inside Ravenlord Citadel were feeling restless. It had been a few days since the adults had turned into crystal statues and Prince Lionel had locked himself up in his room, refusing to see anyone. Right now, the ones in charge of the students in the academy were none other than the head prefects of their respective years. Even so, they were feeling the pressure because they were worried about their own families. Some of them had already snuck out of the fortress to go back to their hometowns to see how their family and relatives were doing. The head prefects decided to turn a blind eye to these behaviors because they could understand how these students were feeling. Maybe we should go back to Lant for a bit, Leah proposed. She was quite worried about Matthew's current mental state. Although her lover did his best to hide it, Leah knew what he was thinking deep inside. After a few minutes of silence, Matthew hugged his wife and kissed her forehead. I'll ask for the prince's permission first, Matthew said. It would be bad if we suddenly disappeared and left the other students behind. Leah nodded her head in understanding. As the head prefect of the 4th years in the magic division, Matthew held a lot of responsibility on his shoulders. Go, Leah replied. I'll wait for you here. Matthew gave her a kiss on the lips before heading out of their quarters. He knew that Leah was right and staying here would just make it hard for him to focus on his duties. Aside from his parents, Matthew was also very worried about his little sister, Eve. He felt his heart break more at the thought of his little sister crying alone inside their residence. Wait for me, Eve, Matthew muttered. Prince Lionel frowned when he heard his subordinates report that several nobles from the academy were asking for a meeting. He had been so preoccupied with Princess Sidonie's escape that he had tossed everything else aside. Since he was the temporary ruler of the Helan Kingdom, he needed to show his face to his subjects and show them that he cared for them. Fine, tell them that we will gather in the conference room in an hour, Prince Lionel said with irritation. The manservant attending him hurriedly bowed his head and left the room. He knew more than anyone else that staying with Prince Lionel, while he was in his current state, was asking for a beating, so he hurriedly escaped to do his bidding. An hour later, all the nobles, the knights, the head prefects and their officers sat in the conference room, waiting for the crown prince's arrival. Thank you for your patience, Prince Lionel said after he entered the conference room with a smile. He then headed straight towards the highest seat of honor. He scanned the room once before taking his seat. The kingdom is currently in chaos, and we don't know what the future holds, Prince Lionel began his speech. However, I believe that, if we all work hand in hand, we will be able to face any challenges that we are going to face after this unexpected turn of events. He paused for a bit to allow his words to sink in, before continuing. I gathered all of you here to hear your thoughts. Now, tell me, What do you want to tell this prince? Prince Lionel inquired. There were several factions in the Helan kingdom and they were separated by their regions. The west, south, north, and east had a head noble that oversaw their territories and acted as the representative of everyone. Lawrence was the representative of the west, while Aramis was the representative of the south. The north and east had their own respective heads as well, but since they had all turned to crystal statues, the duties now fell upon their heirs. A third-year student of the magic division stood from his seat and made his thoughts known. Your Majesty, I suggest that we temporarily return to our domains. If we leave our territories unmanaged, it will be harmful to the kingdom. Right now, we need to focus on stabilizing our resources and maintaining order. The handsome young man with short light brown hair and green eyes said with a serious expression. His name was Jareth, Rebecca's older brother. He had seen how his grandfather had turned into a crystal statue and was worried that his parents had suffered the same fate. Fortunately, Rebecca was now in the central continent so he didn't need to worry about her. However, he would like to return to their territory for the time being to see to the welfare of the survivors. Prince Lionel narrowed his eyes, but as someone that was trained to handle the affairs of the kingdom, he couldn't ignore the thoughts of the nobles under his rule. The southern faction had never liked him, but they also didn't make things difficult for him. A smile broke out of Prince Lionel's face as he nodded his head in an amicable manner. Very well, I will agree to let all of you return to your hometowns, but let us set a deadline. I will give all of you exactly 2 weeks to settle things on your end. After that, we will all meet back in Gladiolus to talk about the future of our kingdom. Everyone in the room sighed in relief because they thought that the Crown Prince wouldn't agree to their request. After the main issue had been dealt with, the conference turned into a discussion about how they would help each other during this time of emergency. The meeting ended after 2 hours and everyone in the room left with satisfied smiles on their faces. When Matthew left the conference room, he saw Leah waiting for him in the hallway. Sorry, I was a bit worried so I came here to wait for you, Leah said with a smile. Did you get permission from the Crown Prince? Matthew nodded his head and held his lover's hand. Let's go. Okay. The two walked hand in hand in the hallway. What they didn't know was that the Crown Prince was looking at the two of them from afar. If I'm not mistaken, that is the head prefect of the 4th years in the magic division. Prince Lionel narrowed his eyes. He's the cousin of that filthy half-elf. Prince Lionel hated William because of his jealousy. Naturally, he wanted the half-elf to suffer, but his subordinates were unable to take his life. The prince's eyes then landed on the beautiful young lady with long, midnight blue, hair that walked beside Matthew. Ever since Princess Sidney escaped his grasp, the prince had wanted to vent out his frustrations on someone. Not bad, she suits my taste well, Prince Lionel thought as he continued to appraise Leah from afar. He then made a gesture for one of the black-robed men to come closer. I want her, Prince Lionel ordered. Bring her to my room tonight, in the capital. The black-robed man nodded his head in understanding. He was Callum's right-hand man. Before he left to look for the princess, Callum ordered him to cater to the demands of the crown prince while he was away. What about the young man beside her? The black-robed man asked. Prince Lionel's lips curled up into an evil sneer as he gave Matthew a sidelong glance. Beat him up, but don't kill him. If possible, bring him back as well. I plan to have fun with his lover. Wouldn't it be better if he was there to watch it? Understood, the black-robed man replied. His hands were already stained with blood and these kinds of plays were nothing new to him. He just didn't think that the crown prince of the Helan kingdom also had that kind of twisted hobby. The crown prince grinned as he looked at the couple in the distance. If you want someone to blame then blame the fact that your surname is Ainsworth. Prince Lionel sneered. Now that all the adults had turned into statues, he didn't have to worry about the repercussions of his actions. I will start with the two of you then I will deal with that filthy half-elf next. Prince Lionel knew that no one in the Helan kingdom had the power to oppose him. Since he had the organization backing him up, he had nothing to fear. He deemed that this was the perfect opportunity to show everyone the fate of those who dared to get in his way. Prince Lionel walked back towards his room in a good mood. He was looking forward to an entertaining night. A night that he would never forget for as long as he lived.